I want to know why Maria's signatures look so much better than mine. We're on?
Not quite. All right, now you're live, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, call to order the City Council Planning Commission Joint Special Meeting of July 6th, 2021. Before the roll call, the City Attorney has an announcement.
Thank you and good evening, Council and Commission. Governor Newsom's executive orders pertaining to the Brown Act currently remain in effect, allowing public meetings like this one to be held by teleconference to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I ask the mayor to recognize me after roll call to confirm certain matters for the record.
Thank you. Please conduct the roll.
Councilmember Armstrong,
Here.
Councilmember Veros,
Here.
Councilmember Zafar,
Here.
Vice Mayor Perkins,
Here.
Mayor Hudson,
Here.
Commissioner Alpert,
Here.
Commissioner Edwards. Here. Thank you. Commissioner Marks,
Here.
Vice Chair Kuznick,
Here.
and Chair Wallace.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah, before I recognize the City Attorney, Commissioner Edwards, was that a time delay for the distance or whatever that anyway, we recognize the City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And based on the responses to the roll call, the record should reflect that all council members and commissioners present can hear the proceedings clearly. And if there are no objections, the record will further reflect that each council member and commissioner believes, based on voice, facial recognition, or otherwise, that persons representing themselves to be either council members or commissioners are in fact council members and commissioners. And seeing no objection, I will turn the meeting back over to you, Mr. Mayor, with a reminder that all votes must be taken by roll call.
Okay, thank you. Public comment is now open. As this is a special meeting, the public is permitted to address the City Council only on items on tonight's agenda. If you decide to speak at this time, you will not be allowed to speak a second time, either at 3.1 or 3.2. If you wish to speak at this time under public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone. When it's your turn to talk, you will be called upon by name if it's provided. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and a clock will be running on the Zoom screen. I'm stalling to see if the number gets higher. We've got 32 attendees, but I don't see anyone wishing to speak. I know we had one written comment on 3.2. I don't see anyone wishing to speak. Did anyone by chance, Christina, say during public comment without 3.1 or 3.2? Okay, we'll stay with that. We're up to 34 attendees still. Going once, going twice, public comment is closed. Let's get on to the new business. That's what we're all here for. 3.1 is a joint study session for a general plan and housing element update. There will be a staff report by Cindy Yee, and then I will ask first the commissioners just to be a misanthrope, or what do you call it, different than what I was suggested to do it. From the commissioners first, starting with Eric Wallace in my left-hand corner, and then we'll ask any council members if there are clarifying questions. Gosh, we're up to 37 attendees and nobody wanted to speak. Okay, we're done with that. Cindy, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, council members and planning commissioners. I'm happy to present this PowerPoint presentation this evening that has been completed with the help of our entire planning team, who's available this evening to answer any questions that you might have. I would like to share my screen if that's possible. Somebody can allow me to
Go ahead and try it.
Okay, there it is. Okay, can you see that slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so tonight's presentation is really to provide a introduction and overview of the general plan and housing element update, as well as to guide you on a couple of topics of discussion that we'd like to introduce you to early on in this process. So just to give a brief overview of the general plan, State law requires that every city have a general plan that will guide its future growth and development. And each chapter within the general plan discusses various different topics such as land use, transportation, housing. It is the principal planning document for the city of San Ramon and really provides a blueprint for development over the next 20 years. Our current general plan was adopted in 2015. We refer to that as General Plan 2035. And while it's still applicable, a number of new and emerging issues need to be addressed. And so we're looking at this multi-year process to address those new issues and also take this opportunity to make associated updates to documents such as the Climate Action Plan and zoning ordinance that are directly impacted by the adoption of the general plan. The goal is completion date of the update by December 2022. Now, just to highlight again, the purpose of General Plan 2040 update, it's really primarily to address a mandatory update of the city's housing element. The scope of 2040 is primarily focused on preparing the update to the housing element for the upcoming 2023 to 2031 housing cycle. It's also meant to ensure internal consistency between the chapters of the document and address changes that state law and policy changes that need to be reflected in the entire document. There's also, with our general plan, a climate action plan and zoning ordinance that also needs to be updated in order to implement our general plan. This general plan update really is not intended to change the current framework or vision of the general plan. And so there is no proposed general urban growth boundary changes associated with this update. Now, just to give a little bit more background on the housing element. So one of the mandatory chapters within the general plan requires that the city assess the current and future housing needs of our residents. We have to identify constraints and opportunities for how those needs can be met. And we have to provide a comprehensive strategy that establishes our city's goals for housing, our housing policies and programs that is going to ultimately implement those housing goals. This element has to be reviewed and certified by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And the goal of this plan is to really plan for how much housing within a 8-year housing cycle that the city needs to address. That's often referred to as the Regional Housing Needs Allocation or RHNA process. And so that is ultimately what guides how much housing the state expects the city needs to plan for over that 8-year period. So just to break out what those roles and responsibilities are, from the state's role in the RHNA process is really to identify in total how many units our region has to plan for during that 8 years. Once they've developed that total housing units number, they then provide the Association of Bay Area Governments the opportunity to create a methodology on how they distribute that total number of units throughout the Bay Area. Once ABAG has completed their methodology and allocation, then it's ultimately San Ramon's role to determine where these units will have to go within the city of San Ramon. And so just a quick comparison of what our current housing cycle is having to plan for, and then what our new assignment is expected to be for this next 8-year cycle. So currently our RHNA allocation for San Ramon is just a little over 1,400 units. And they're broken up by various household income categories. So we have to plan for housing from very low, moderate to above moderate, or what is called market rate, oftentimes referred to as market rate. So in total, Saramone has to plan for a variety of different housing income categories over that 8-year period. Our upcoming RHNA cycle, which begins in 2023, our anticipated allocation is going to be 5,100 units, just a little over 5,100 units. And so you can see just based on this chart that our RHNA allocation has gone up over 260% from our last housing cycle to our new housing cycle. And the majority of these units that are being assigned to Saramone are expected to be in that affordable housing income category. So primarily the units that the city is going to be focusing on is how do we provide low, very low and moderate income units in the city of Saramone. So in order for us to get to December 2022, we first need to kick off this general plan update, which is kind of what this study session is aimed to do. From this point forward, once we get the final RHNA allocation from ABAG later this year, we'll continue our public engagement and outreach effort and do all of the analysis and work that needs to happen to get this housing element ready for public review and comment. Our goal throughout all of next year is to prepare the update and present that at various public hearings and to allow for stakeholders and committees and commissions and the City Council to weigh in on this general plan document. So by late 2022, the city will be submitting our adopted element to HCD. So tonight, we've broken down 3 different policy discussion topics just to get us started on some of these big picture issues that the city needs to address. And a lot of these issues really are is a direct result of this new increase in RHNA allocation. And so one of these policy discussions is with this increase in RHNA, where ultimately should these new housing opportunity sites go? So again, 260% increase in the city's RHNA. And we're constrained as a city by our urban growth boundary and just the lack of available land within that urban growth boundary. So what we'll need to do is focus on what the inventory of developable land is within that UGB. And as our past general plans have identified, our focus is really to look at where infill opportunities will be to put these additional housing units. Typically that's going to be within the city's core and priority development areas. Policy tools that the city should be considering in order to accommodate this new RHNA are things such as increasing the density range allowed on these infill sites and providing greater development flexibility, such as tools that include reducing parking requirements, potentially increasing heights, reducing setbacks, etc. And currently, the city's seeking community input on the city's webpage. We've created a interactive tool on the city's website for residents to provide their suggestions to add their recommendations for future housing opportunity sites in Saramone. So definitely encourage the community to get onto the city's website and provide us your feedback on where you think units should go in Saramone. The second policy discussion, again related to the increase in the RHNA, is how do we balance the retail and residential land use needs? And the more of an increase in housing opportunity sites, the more of an impact that has to other land uses, because by increasing the need for residential, there has to be an equally, separate action that reduces the land use in other areas. And so one of the discussion topics is focused on how are we going to balance the retail and residential land use. So in the past, the city has targeted meeting our RENA through the creation of housing opportunity sites on larger parcels that have the potential for redevelopment. And in the past, those have been centered around shopping centers that had a proximity to residential by being able to support higher density on the larger parcels and putting housing closer to goods and services. We developed this mixed use opportunity sites where residential was anticipated to go onto existing shopping centers. Over the course of time, we've had some additional evaluation through retail analysis and our economic element update that further identified which shopping centers were better suited for mixed use and which were better suited primarily just for retail. And so with this new general plan update, we will have to update that retail analysis under these new condition of having to increase housing opportunity sites. So really the question is, how do we best move forward with balancing the city's retail needs, but also this state mandate of additional residential needs? Something to keep in mind is that with recent adoption of state law, a number of the existing parcels that have already been identified as residential or mixed use will likely have to be maintained as mixed use or residential in the general plan update, because unless you're replacing those units somewhere else, it's going to be really difficult to find additional sites when we're taking them off of shopping centers. And so something just to keep in mind is that it's going to be very difficult to modify existing housing opportunity sites and take them off as residential properties. And then the third topic discussion this evening is again related to the increase in RENA. With the increase in RENA, that will increase the number of residents that are going to be living in Saramone, which has a direct correlation to how much parkland is going to be required. The more people that live in Saramone, the higher the number of acres in parkland that the city is required in the general plan. And so where does this parkland go? And ultimately, do we need to broaden our definition of parkland to better address this balance of residential and parkland needs? So just a bit of history in terms of the park and open space standards. When the city adopted its first general plan in 1986, the city had created a public parkland standard of 6.5 acres of parkland for every 1,000 residents at the general plan build out. And so what that means is that as we increase by 1,000 residents, there's another 6.5 acres of land that we'd like to increase for every new 1,000 people that move into Saramone or that Saramone grows. State law, which is referred to the Quimby Act, specifically authorizes the city to require that residential subdivisions meet a parkland ratio of 3 acres per 1,000. And then the Quimby Act also allows cities that currently exceed the 3 acres per 1,000 to establish a standard, but a higher standard, but that standard cannot exceed 5 acres per 1,000. And so there's really two standards that the city has to meet currently in our general plan. One is the Quimby Act obligation of not to exceed the 5 acres per 1,000. And then this separate public parkland standard of 6.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. So the city's, any additional parkland beyond the Quimby Act obligation is really ultimately the city's responsibility. And those are not allowed to be exacted from development proposals. And so as a city, we'll need to figure out how are we going to continue to achieve the 6.5 acre ratio, and do we need to look at think outside of the box on how do we meet the 6.5 acre ratio. So one of the considerations that have been made in recent years is this idea of privately owned public spaces, or referred to as POPs. And so because of the limited availability of land, the city has been considering these POPs to address the recreation and open space needs of the community. POPs is one strategy towards achieving this 6.5 acre ratio, and they can be designed with city input, but the long-term maintenance of these privately owned open spaces and public spaces would ultimately be the responsibility of the private property owner. We can provide credit for parkland construction to subdivision developers, but there needs to be a way that we establish criteria for what's considered a suitable publicly accessible private open space, and then creating safeguards for the long-term maintenance of these privately owned spaces. So a discussion that was recently that the Open Space Advisory Committee took on was whether or not we need to reevaluate the definition of parkland and allow open space and or trails to be counted towards meeting the city's 6.5 acre ratio. So currently there's about 3,500 acres of open space and trails that are not considered parkland. They don't factor into the 6.5 acre ratio. And potentially by expanding the parkland definition and including open space and or trails to that definition, we may be able to satisfy that 6.5 acre ratio, but it may have implications for requiring other parks in the future from future developments, because we would have already met our Quimby Act obligations of the 5 acres per thousand. And so can we continue to ask for more parkland when we've met our ratios for build out? So as part of this update, because we will have a new population projection, we'll have to look at what criteria for parkland needs to go into this new update. So just breaking down the policy discussion questions for this evening, we're looking for comments regarding housing opportunity sites, comments related to the mixed use development and retail uses, and then the parkland and open space standards, looking at the definition of parklands and whether we include public, private trails and open space into that definition. And then with these publicly owned public spaces, when can those be allowed, and what type of credit would one get for providing those publicly accessible but privately owned spaces. So after this study session, we're going to continue additional policy conversations with the public through outreach and engagement. These study sessions will continue through 2022. And ultimately, again, our goal is adoption of the general plan update by December 2022, which will allow for the city to apply for state certification of the housing element. So that's my presentation this evening. I'm certainly open to taking questions or comments now.
If you would, Cindy, hold on a minute. I'm going to ask the commissioners first if they have any questions of Cindy or staff before we open public comment. And then I'll ask the council if they have any. And I was just going to say, does anybody have a question that is part of the staff report before we take it down? Because yes, I do have a question about page 9. But commissioners, do you have any questions that you would want her to put the staff report back up? Or I don't see any
I have
hands.
a question.
Go ahead, Jean.
Thank you. Cindy, very clear presentation. In the assessment of housing units from the state, does it make it designate or does it differentiate between something that would be like senior housing that includes, memory care or assisted living? Because I know we currently, I believe, have 3 possible developments that have been proposed. Are those different than what the RENA numbers specify, or does it not make that designation or the differentiation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a specific housing definition in state law, and state law actually precludes senior care facilities from being counted towards meeting a city's RENA obligation. So although in theory, the people living at the senior care facility live there full time and count on that as their primary place of residence, that doesn't count towards a bed, or a facility doesn't count towards a city's RENA allocation. And so no matter how many beds in a memory care or in a senior care facility, that's considered a business under state law. And so those beds cannot count as units.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
It was a nice try, Jean. We've only been trying it for, this is the 6th cycle. We're gonna do the commissioners first, and then I'll go to council member Zafar, and then Veros. Gary Alpert, you're up. And then Corey.
Great, thanks Cindy for the presentation. Could you comment on how ADU, JDUs are factored into this discussion?
Sure. ADUs, commonly known as accessory dwelling units or second units, some people call them granny units. Those are considered smaller secondary units that are put onto a residential site that is considered a separate living unit from the primary living unit. And ADUs the city has the ability to count those ADUs towards meeting our RENA. So there's been a big focus from the state level to create new incentives and state laws that allow for the easier development of ADUs. So now cities can approve ADUs just through a building permit process, and ADUs can go on single family units or multifamily units. There's a number of flexibilities that state law has created to create opportunities for ADUs. And so that can count towards our RENA obligation, but most of those ADUs typically are counted as market rate units. And so they meet the market rate requirement that the city has, unless that unit has some sort of deed restriction or some restriction that requires it to be rented to somebody in a specific household income category.
I'd also like to add, the junior ADUs are quite the small unit. They're about 250 square feet to 300 square feet. So one thing we can do as we work through this element is working with the state to have them basically affordable by design, and maybe be able to establish a square footage and an income category that the state may accept for us to count those moving forward. So there are options that through our discussions with the state that we certainly can continue to explore to count more of these junior ADUs or the ADUs towards our RENA allocation also.
If I could just follow up, are there rules about how many we can assume will be built in the next 8-year cycle? We can't just assume arbitrary number will be built, or can we?
So one of the parts of our housing element includes a specific program of how the city plans to meet our RENA. One of those programs in the past has been how many ADUs the city can facilitate over the next 8-year cycle. And so we will be evaluating how many units, just based on past practice, that the city can help with facilitating through various programs that we can create in San Ramon. And so there will be a projected number of ADUs included as part of the housing element.
Great. Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Mayor.
That was a great try, Gary, but no, there won't be 5,000 ADUs.
That was my
Corey, you
question.
had your hand up for a minute. Did you second thoughts? And then I'll go to Eric Wallace.
Yeah, I'll defer to Eric Wallace for the time being. Thank you.
EW, you're up.
All right, I want to follow up on the affordable housing question. And that is, of the 5,000 RENA units we've been allocated, over 3,000 are either very low, low, or moderate income. That's affordable housing. When we go up to HCD to try and prove that our housing element meets the state's requirements, don't we have to show the state that our plan will allow for construction of 3,000 affordable units?
We will. So as part of our policies and programs to implement our housing, our RENA, we don't just have to show where the sites are going to go, where these units are going to be constructed, but we also have to have a plan and a program in place that identifies that on each of these sites, generally how many affordable units can be supported on each of these sites. And so that will ultimately quantify how many affordable units the city can actually facilitate on the housing opportunities that we've created.
Okay, then following up on that question, the inclusionary housing ordinance we have would generate one affordable unit for every 6 market rate units, right?
Right, because our inclusionary ordinance requires that basically 15% of a project typically is set aside as an affordable unit.
Right, so using kindergarten math, if we are required to prove to the state that our housing element will generate 3,000 affordable units, doesn't that mean that 3,000 affordable units is going to have to come along with roughly 18,000 market rate units?
So in theory, that is generally what the city has to do. There will be certain anomalies on housing opportunity sites where you might have a 100% affordable, project. You might have housing requirements that maybe are at a higher percentage or ratio that a developer may be offering. But generally speaking, because our inclusionary sets a restriction of about 15% of so the one unit for every 6 market rates, as you referred to, it does mean that we probably have to plan for a lot more housing units because of this factor of not being able to rely on 100% affordable on all of our opportunity sites.
All right, last question. In our last housing cycle, have we ever had a 100% affordable housing development in San Ramon?
So we're in 5 cycles right now, and at least the last 3 housing cycles that I've worked on, we have not been able to 100% meet our affordable housing percentage that was assigned to us.
Okay. So I retract my last question. My last question is, if we have to generate 20,000 units in order to develop the 3,000 plus affordable units, aren't we really talking about a combination of rezoning parts of San Ramon for housing, particularly high density housing, and second, talking about higher densities than we've looked at in the past?
Yeah, and so that is one of the policy discussions that we've prepared tonight, is in light of how best to accommodate this 5,000 unit allocation. We'll really need to start thinking about a variety of tools that we'll need to include as part of this update. And that does include things like rezoning, increasing densities, modifying development standards to make it possible for developments to be larger or accommodate more units. And so those are all discussion questions that we'd like some feedback on tonight.
Thank you.
And Eric's last question is, has anybody made their very low or low? You don't have to answer that one, Cindy.
I think the
Doesn't
answer is
matter.
no. I think the answer
The
is
answer is no. I'll leave it alone. Rick, you got any great contemplation? You and I think everybody else has spoken. Hadn't I missed anybody? You want to jump in with something, or we move to council? Go ahead.
I have a request for information, and I'm not sure that the staff's in a position to answer it tonight, but turning to the issue of parks, does the city have an aggregate number regarding the total number of park acres that are publicly owned and the 2020 population census? In other words, when you take a look at the total acreage relative to the population and compare it to the visionary standard of 6.5 acres, can we get some information during this process regarding that? And then I'd like to know, with that number, if you added in the total number of trails and then the total number of acres of open space, again, compared to the 6.5 acres, where does that place us? Again, I'm not looking for information tonight, but during this process, since that is a question we need to take a look at, I just need some basic information about where we are.
Sure.
Good question.
I know, just at least with our current general plan, there is a plan in place to get to 6.5 at general plan build out, but we have not looked at the new 2020 census numbers and looked at the new population increase since the last general plan update. And so certainly we'll definitely be able to put that together for the next series of sessions that we have.
Okay, and then actually a last request. The PowerPoint presentation was very good. I wonder if we could have copies of that presentation.
Yes.
And before we go to council, I want to point out and make sure I got this right, Rick. Your question was publicly owned parks
Right.
or open spaces.
I'm not looking at anything that we may have that is privately owned, publicly accessible, but rather things that are land that is owned by the city.
Okay. We'll go on to Corey, unless you've got you're dying to come in there with that last thing. We're going to Councilmember Safar.
Go on to Councilmember Safar.
See, she let me do it. Go ahead, Sabina.
Thank you. So just a few questions. Cindy, one, does anything dictate the size of these units? Or that's something we can make part of our policy decisions?
Nothing in state law requires a maximum or housing unit size. ADUs, there is a requirement in state law that has a minimum for junior ADUs and for ADUs. We as a city have set a maximum for ADUs because of the nature and way that they're constructed on an existing site. But outside of ADUs, the city has not placed limitations on sizes of units. And so potentially that may be a strategy as far as looking at when we're looking at a variety of types of units on a site, having a mix of small and large units so that can potentially accommodate more units, depending on where the council and commission sees is a good option for sizes of units.
And the second question is about, are there any requirements whether these have to be rentals or purchase, or that's again up to the city to decide?
As far as RENA can be met through the various types of units that are available to the city. So they could be single room occupancy units, they could be ADUs, they can be rental apartments, condos, or ownership units. So any type of unit that by definition the state calls a unit, we can count those towards our RENA.
And do we know any price points around what are considered very low? Do we have that number, or that is just relative to?
There are. So when we talk about affordable and income categories, the state identifies what those income categories are based on the county that you live in. So in Contra Costa County, area median income is ultimately what dictates the low, very low, and moderate. So let's say if our city's median income was 100,000, just to make it really simple, very low is considered no more than 50% of area median income. So a household that would fall into very low would not make more than $50,000.
So my question was, sorry, more around the price of the units.
The price of the units, yes. So the price of the units are also dictated by area median income. So if a person in very low, let's say, makes no more than 50,000, then the rent associated with that unit cannot exceed 30% of that 50,000 on a monthly basis. Same for a for sale unit. Something for sale to a very low income would not exceed what would be considered 30% of what they can afford for housing expenses. And that housing price would then be set based on, again, area median income.
And do we have an idea whether that's like 300,000 in San Ramon for a low income unit?
So I can tell you a good reference point would be the Lennar project that's currently for sale to very low and low. For a very low income household, a family of two or more, that unit a very low income unit is priced at about $173,000. And then for very low, it's in that mid 300,000 range.
Thank you so much. I just, when we talk about very low and low, it's so relative to California. You could, for 300,000 in Alabama, you could buy a place with a tennis court and a pool. just saying, right?
Right. And even though those numbers comparatively to the rest of the nation sounds really high or even average, in comparison, those market rate units that are in that same development are going for 3 times as much as the low income unit. And so that's just a comparison of what the market is paying compared to what the affordable household can pay.
Thank you.
Sridhar.
Thank you, Cindy, for presentation. Regarding ABAG appeal process in fall 2021, could you please explain what exactly the process, how it goes on?
Sure. So there was a year-long effort to establish the methodology to create the allocation of units to cities. That methodology process just concluded earlier this year, which then allowed ABAG to create the number of units for each city. They just released those numbers just back in May, and the appeal period, cities have the ability to file an appeal by this July. So just in the next week or so, the city has the ability to appeal our RHNA allocation. And then there's basically a committee review process that ABAG has to consider each appeal request. And then depending on the outcome of those appeals, the final RHNA will then be potentially recalculated, and then units that are taken out of certain cities have to be reallocated to the rest of the Bay Area. And so there's no just reduction. It does have a counter effect on other cities that would be receiving those numbers, because the state creates one whole number for the region. And when you take out some units from one city, you have to place them in other cities. So our allocation right now of 5,100 units, depending on how successful the city's appeal is, that number could potentially go down. If our appeal is not successful, that number could potentially go up if other cities are granted their appeals. our numbers could potentially go up. We won't know those decisions until this fall.
So are we planning to appeal anything at this point?
Yes, we are actually. The appeal is due by this Friday, and we will be appealing our arena allocation. And just very quickly, primarily, we're focusing on the decrease in employment or jobs that we will be seeing in Bishop Ranch with the development of City Walk and the pending BR6 proposal that's before the Planning Commission and City Council. So in generalities, we're looking at lower employment numbers, which technically should reduce and lower housing requirements, but we will be working through the appeal process, as Cindy stated, and we will keep the council updated on that.
Sounds good. And regarding this public outreach, so what exactly we are looking from public outreach? Like, is it specifically about the site's information, or what kind of input we are looking from, and what are the methods that we are planning to use in order to conduct the public outreach?
So it will be tailored to specific stakeholders. So for example, right now, our current engagement tool on the city's website is asking for feedback from the public on where they would suggest future housing sites to go in San Ramon. And so that's a map that somebody can actually pinpoint where they would recommend the city focus future growth. There's also in the past, the way that we've done outreach is perhaps talking with specific people that have a certain interest, whether that's open space groups, realtor groups, retail, property owners, et cetera. And so doing tailored outreach to those stakeholders to engage them in the process of the general plan update. We've also done in the past booths at various festivals or the farmers market, community workshops is primarily what we tend to focus on, charrette type of style, where we have maps for people to provide us input on. So we have a variety of tools. The city has a consultant that we are working with to assist with additional community outreach efforts. But there's probably going to be a lot more focus on sort of a web-based engagement, social media, next door, those types of posts that are asking people to assist with getting more feedback.
Sounds good. My last question regarding this, as City Walk is approved, right? So we are looking at 2023 to 2035. There is going to be development. Do we have any estimate or approximate numbers that we will be creating, like how many units will be created by 2035 from City Walk and any other developments?
I saw Lauren unmute, so maybe I'll defer to him.
I mean, it's largely dependent on the construction schedule. As you're aware, City Walk is over a 27-year build out. And so it'll likely be that the 4,500 units will be divided over 3 housing cycles. But there could be some acceleration and some delay. We just have to get a little bit closer to the time horizons that we're looking at. But for this first session, we would probably look at in the neighborhood of 1,500 units in City Walk. There is a schedule that was prepared as part of the environmental document that has phases and when they were expected to come online, but that's all driven by market conditions.
Okay, thank you. That's Mayor Hudson. That's all my questions.
Okay, Mark and Scott, if you've got something, if not, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Cindy. I had a question on your second discussion topic. It was on that need to balance the retail and the residential needs. And because it seems to me if we take out retail and put in residential, then we're going to have more people coming in as we built out in this RENA cycle, and yet that's going to drive a greater demand for retail, which we've just taken out potentially in some locations. So how is this new retail analysis done? Just kind of briefly, how does that take place on the retail analysis? And then how do you factor in the online sales that was referenced in the staff report, and that what may be true today with respect to online sales, which may or may not be true in the future with respect to online sales?
So let me jump in. Not an easy question to ask, Councilmember Armstrong, because we don't really know all the effects from COVID yet and how the world of retail has changed. So we are all kind of learning as we go forward and trying to understand what we're going to look like when we're kind of come out of COVID, how shopping habits have changed, more online, bricks and mortar, what it's going to look like. What I am hearing is that, you know, with the abundance of online shopping, easy delivery, is that retail centers need to be experience oriented. So you need to be able to go there to have a service such as a haircut that you can't purchase online. Probably will be one key to look at, you know, maintaining successful retail centers. But, you know, that's a short term. It could be 5 to 7 years that exists. So we need to make sure as we look at our retail shopping needs versus our housing needs, is that we're not looking at myopically, that we're looking down the path and taking the long view that the shopping centers will be able to respond to the market needs. So it's, you know, I wish I could give you a specific answer that we expect X, Y, and Z to occur and equate to how much retail to balance our housing needs. But I think as we work through this retail study and begin to gather more information, we'll be able to educate ourselves and of course the council and commission members better down the road, if that helps you with an answer.
Just add one other point to that. The amount of space that retail takes will also be changing. You know, in the past, you know, furniture stores and the like had inventory on site. Now they have showrooms and direct delivery. Likewise, other retailers have scaled back in terms of the amount of space that they take within a shopping center. So that creates opportunities for additional uses within those and those services that Debbie mentioned. But it's something that we have to do some visioning over and really start trying to understand where we're headed.
So is that retail analysis something the consultant will help facilitate, or is it the staff or economic development advisory committee or all the above with public input? I'm just trying to understand that process.
It's basically kind of all the above. So we'll work with our consultant team to develop a draft retail study that, as with the last one, did work its way through our EDAC committee and the commission and the city council. So it'll be part and part with the general plan update, because our economic element is one that we will be taking a look at as we go forward and to balance the retail, housing, and open space needs for the community.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Scott, you got anything before I chime in? Okay. Before I ask you to put up number 9, I just want to delve a little deeper into some of the questions that Sridhar was asking, Mark. In front of me, I have what it takes to file an appeal. Staff recommendation for redistributing units from successful appeals. This may be of interest. Appellants whose appeals are upheld are not excluded from redistribution. You can win the appeal and the 5111 could go up. Anybody that wants to look at this, what is reasons for appealing and not appealing, I'll put on the desk in here if you want to come in. What have other COGs done? Councils of governments like ABAC. Sacramento region had 0 appeals last year. LA region this year had 48 appeals, 2 were partially upheld. San Diego region last year had 4 appeals, 1 partially upheld. And ABAG, the 2013 cycle, which I just told you about, 8 appeals, 3 upheld, and we went from 951 numbers to 14. So when you're asking the question, Sridhar, about the appeal, and you're thinking 5111 and we're going down, not necessarily. And there are 5 or 6 that I know have already put in an appeal. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're in Santa Clara or San Mateo County, you better have the greatest reason in the world to be making an appeal, because you're the reason our numbers are that high. So if you need any further information, I'll leave it on the desk here, other than tell you what I told Mark the other day. The appeal goes to the Administrative Subcommittee of ABAG. Congratulations. The one appeal I can't vote on would be ours. So you better hope that I get the others right. Page 9, Cindy, do you have it by any chance? Look something like that if you come in here. I saw something and I hadn't thought about it until you brought it up, and that was the urban limit line. Constraints of the urban limit line. I'm going to see, this is where I don't know how different we are from the county. The county urban limit line, for us losing our return to source, effectively expires December of 2026. And I'm looking more at the mid-year cycle or the mid-cycle review of RENA being 2027. So I mean, it probably needs a little investigation to see how different are we with that 25 acres. We tried to take it out, but didn't have the 4/5 vote. Thank you, Harry, if you're listening, before that it takes a 4/5 vote about expanding the urban limit line beyond. We're 25, they were 30. But I mean, 2027, unless there's a change, if somebody wants to start working on applying to LAFCO to, you know, to annex something, they don't lose their return to source money. That's the way I understood it. And I asked Iwasaki a couple times. It might be important as we look on some of our borders where there is some land, you know, and is close to some of our arterials that might make it pay off. But the RENA numbers are going to be a lot of fun. I'm more concerned. I know the appeal and I know you won't take me again to the appeal process, but yeah, I think I was the one that probably was your worst advocate the last time, Debbie. But I think you've got a good plan, at least, on what you're trying to do it. I will just tell you the thing that worries me the most is the part of the appeal that it has to show how it furthers the RENA process. And it's just anything that reduces numbers doesn't seem to do that. I think it'll be fun. I'll just leave it at that. I don't have any more questions. Unless somebody comes in late, we'll open up the public comment. Public comment is open. If you wish to speak under public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone. When it's your turn to talk, we will call upon you by name if it's provided. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and the clock will be running on the Zoom screen. The speaker's microphone will be muted once the allotted time has expired. Let's bring in caller in use 1. You have the floor. Can you hear? Yes, we
Hi,
can.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, well, first of all, sorry, I need to complain a little. I had a hard time downloading this agenda and also the agenda that was posted for July 8th, 2 p.m. meeting. Both agendas are coming from the planning commission department or the planning department. I'm wondering if, you know, they can please check into why their agendas, you know, come difficult to the citizens for downloading. That really affected my participation today. That's why I was so late. Also, because I was so late, I missed the majority of the presentation. So I strongly would like the mayor and the council members to please vote down anything that is really for affordable housing, because these are driven by politicians from Sacramento. And I believe that if we ever were going to stand up for our community, this is where we need to stand up. I don't understand why Ms. E would say that the mid-range or the lower housing for us is $300,000. That sounds so low. she said that if our medium income is at 100,000, I don't understand why she is giving hypothetical numbers instead of, she should know the exact numbers. I was disappointed in that. I also would like to see all the housings that are put up for sale going forward, that our city put up buying restrictions in terms of numbers, of the number of units they can buy, where the money is coming from. You know, obviously, if it's coming from overseas, we should not allow those buyers, you know, instead of putting our own citizens, American citizens, on the back burner. I really hope that we can have take back some jurisdiction for our municipal influence and legal power on what kind of people we want in our community and what kind of housing projects we want to build. I also raised concerns on the 500 Deerwood that's coming up for discussion on Thursday. The location is so close to the current general plan for the Bishop Ranch, you know, over multiple year release. I'm concerned about overlapping of, you know, invasion into our infrastructures, and that there's going to be major traffic problems and stuff like that. So just a basket of my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, Scott Rennicks. And I will say while he's coming in, Cindy doesn't get to make these numbers up. They're either coming from the county or they're coming from the state, and they're changing just as fast as we could find out what could you do now that would make it worse. Scott, you have the floor. Can you hear? Are you in? You're still muted. Try again. We may have to come back to Scott, but he's the last person. We're going to close the public comment. Scott, are you having trouble getting in? Uh-oh. There he is. You're still muted, but your timer's going. No.
He may have accidentally raised his hand because that is staff.
Scott, you get 4 demerits. All right, we're cutting Scott out. There's nobody else that wants to speak under public comment. Public comment is closed. The matter is before the council. Will start off with council this time. Vice Mayor, council members, do you have any comments before we go to commission? I don't see any hands raised. I do see a hand raised. Okay, we're going to start with Sabina. She was quicker than you, Scott. Go ahead.
I think so just want to kick it off with what staff is looking at us, right? A lot of this is, these are the numbers we will probably have to work with. We have to be creative in our policy on how we plan for these numbers. Whether we all agree we should be meeting these numbers or not, whether we want to contest them is another question. But right now, how can we plan our city? And this is all about the planning process, I think. So am I right, Mayor? That's kind of the direction that staff
I'd
is.
say you just about nailed it.
Yeah. And so for me, it's like, as we think about our policies, how do we become more creative? I know the last cycle we were creative when we, you know, changed some of that to mixed use. It may not have gone in the directions that we were looking for possibly. And so how do we now tighten our policies so we maintain both our retail and our housing? You know, meet our housing needs as we strike a balance between the two. So, you know, something that Council Member Armstrong raised as well, right? More people means more retail, and we've had this discussion. And so right now it's like, how do we plan for both of them? And thank you. I appreciated Debbie and Cindy and, you know, Lauren, that you are going back to do an analysis on retail and see how this is all going to really fit in. One comment that I have is we live too large in San Ramon. You know, we have 4,000, 5,000 square feet houses. That's amazing. That's great for families. But I think as we plan for this, one of the ways that I would really like to see it, how we start living small. You know, that is one way to create affordable housing. You know, not everybody needs to necessarily live in a 5,000 square foot house have, a bedroom that's size of a football field sometimes. I don't know. I have seen people's closets larger than their bedrooms, which may have served, and does serve a certain population, but we can't continue to plan for that. So I would say, as we think about the policy, as we think about planning for that, how do we plan for smaller housing so that we can build more in the same square footage? And to Lauren's point, how do we plan for retail as well, that it coexists? I remember hearing the word Manhattanize in one of the commission meetings I was watching, but we're not necessarily Manhattanizing, San Ramon, but Manhattan does exist where retail exists and housing exists in all these small neighborhoods. And I was just there. That's why I'm kind of, I noticed as whenever I go to any city now, it's like, as we're planning for San Ramon, and smaller spaces do exist, right? As you have smaller houses as well, people generally tend to eat out as well. They don't cook as much in the kitchen because it's a 500 square foot apartment. It's, and a lot of it is for younger people as well, right? As they are making less than 100,000, as our teachers are making, that's a big one for me. Being able to live and afford to live in our communities, that's an important one. And people are okay with living small. As I'm talking to more young people, they don't necessarily want to live big. So one of the things I would, like to, as we talk about this, consider is how do we use size both in retail and in housing to use to our advantage, and we design a policy where that can kind of dictate how we build for and plan for the future.
Sridhar, then Scott.
Thank you for once again presentation, Debbie, C, Lauren, great job. Regarding house opportunity sites, I think we are in the right direction, especially not touching our open spaces and looking at infill sites. Definitely that's a right direction. I think you are moving in, and also most of our infills are where our jobs are. So it's good that we are looking at those sites. On mixed use, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward for our retail analysis. I totally agree that post-COVID-19 changed a lot of retail business, how the things are done. So from my personal experience as well as the community feedback that I get, definitely it's going to be play a key role. The analysis is going to play a key role on this mixed use. Also, one more thing is census results. That also, because right now we are seeing a lot of migration from California. At least we lost almost one congressional seat, right? So pretty much, so that definitely going to play again a key role. So when I'm saying that appeal, it's not like I'm very optimistic guy. I don't just go and say that okay, I before fight I just don't give up. So I'm glad that you're working on that so that we can submit our appeal and see at least we don't get more than what we have. That itself is going to be help us in long run. And also one more thing on that housing house open site, especially with the competing interests from the community. I do get multiple requests recently about worship places. People keep asking about there are not many worship places within San Ramon. That's one thing I keep request. And also the event centers. San Ramon don't have any event centers. Like the one which we have is very limited sizes. So, but then we have limitations on these urban growth limits, right? So we need to be a little bit more creative, I think, on how we can work around and see if we can figure out a way to provide some sites for these community requests. And once again, like I agree with Council Member Jafar that currently most of the community members that I see is like millennial as well as seniors. They are looking for smaller size of housing, not like huge lots, and they want to get out of those. Actually, there are many families where their kids are out of the college and they want to move out, but they want to live in San Ramon. They like, I just recently, one of my neighbor, he set up for a sale for his house, then he came back. I asked him why, then he said like, we don't see like why we should leave San Ramon. So they came back and they're like just couple living in that big house. But then he said like, we are looking for a house which is smaller size within San Ramon, where we can go have a cup of coffee by walking, avoid transportation, taking cars and all that. So that will be definitely a future for our San Ramon residents to see small houses close to jobs, close to shopping centers, as well as like where they don't have to do commute for every single thing. So that will be, yeah, that's pretty much my feedback. Thank you.
Did they just beep you for 3 minutes? Was that what that sound was? Scott, you're up. And you're muted.
There we go.
I thought I was.
I'm particularly concerned at what we see is possibly happening at the marketplace. And in our mixed use definition, if we can create a clause or restriction that the primary tenant or a tenant with more than 40,000 square feet cannot be eliminated, if we can do something like that, or I don't want to see us, because we have a couple other mixed use sites, and I think I read that we can't unmix them. And if we can't unmix them, can we at least restrict what parts of the site can or can't be used for housing? I don't want to demolish another grocery store going forward. That seems to be the real trigger for most of the emails I'm getting. Granted, there are other businesses involved, but I don't want to see any more grocery stores demolished to put up a few dozens of units. That's the biggest issue I have right now. I'm sure we'll come up with some interesting creative solutions to deal with 18,000 housing units going forward. But please, let's keep our grocery stores. So far as the use of open space as part of our public, as part of our parks, I really hate to give up on our 6.5, but if the state says you can't use that going forward with your developers, we're going to have to find another way to keep our parks as a key element of what makes San Ramon San Ramon. That's my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, and before we go to, she ducked out again. Let me get back to the panelists here. Before we go to the planning commissioners, I just had 3 points. I brought it up before. We need to be sure that we're on the right page with the expiration of the urban limit line for the county. I mean, we probably should have taken our municipal urban limit line out at the same time if we're not going to have, we don't want to be punished. That's all. Be sure of what we're doing when we finalize it. The other thing that I brought up before, and I think it goes to the point that your council members have been talking to, is the smaller units. I still contend that you're hitting the end of the economic life on things like the Residence Inn, and we're seeing conversions of them in other places. Brad Paul, the executive director of ABAG, would love to work on that. Jenny Berg spit out that she'd be worth or going after $45,000 per unit for conversion. Of course, if Marriott doesn't want to do it, really doesn't matter. Earlier, it was talked about just say no. I would strongly suggest you do something that the former planning director did to me. When I said just say no, he got me a copy of the anti-NIMBY laws, and in bold type underlined, the judge may award twice as many units. before you say no, you darn well had better have a great case, not just a good case. Outside of that, let's go to Corey. You've been dying all night to say something. Give us the words of wisdom. And then Eric.
Words of wisdom. I don't know that I've got words of wisdom, but I just want to make a quick comment on the concept of privately owned public open space. I'm glad to hear that we are considering that. I do tend to think that improvements in our community that increase connectivity between neighborhoods and increase connectivity between our retail and our residential uses should be encouraged. We want to be, and we need to be, increasing that connectivity. We want San Ramon to feel more like San Ramon. I live out in the Windermere area. The walking areas that we have out there integrate our parkland and our residential uses. They are well done, and it's something that I would like to see continue as we move forward with development. Something I am concerned about is with for sale residential projects, potentially putting the obligation to maintain that privately owned public open space on something like a homeowners association that's maybe ill-equipped to undertake that burden is something I think we really should be thinking about. I think it's a very different thing to put those maintenance obligations on an institutional apartment developer and institutional owner. I think it's very different than putting those burdens onto a homeowners association. So I think that's something we should be thinking about going forward. In terms of the balance between the retail and the residential, I'm not convinced that it's one or the other. I tend to think, and I'm hoping that our planning staff comes back to us with some good news. And I think that we, as well as members of our community, should be putting our heads together and thinking about how does our residential use support our retail? And how can we encourage our residential development to support and have a synergy with the retail? We need to have retail in this community. I think that one of the things that we're hearing so much about with the marketplace development is we're going to lose a big retail center. We're going to lose a grocery store. We're going to lose a toy store. I don't know that we need to lose these things. And I think that there's enough really good examples in the Bay Area of good mixed use development. I'm just not convinced that it's an or. I think we should be looking at, can we do residential and retail, make them both work and make them both successful? So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, I would do Eric and then Gary, but I'd ask, because you brought it up, staff, there isn't an application to do the marketplace at this time, correct?
Right.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
All right, with respect to Councilmember Perkins' observation of mixed use, several of us on the Planning Commission have talked about looking and maybe redefining the definition of mixed use in the general plan. That's in part spurred by the concept review we had for Marketplace. With respect to parkland, it came up at the Open Space Committee that the national average for parkland per 1,000 residents is 5 acres, not 6.5. We are an outlier by far in terms of that number, which was done in 1986. And I think that at some point, someone ought to look at whether that 6.5 acres is really feasible. With respect to the comments about smaller homes versus 5,000 square foot homes, what was anticipated for North Camino Ramon was actually housing in the 1,000 to 1,100 square foot range. What we have in City Village obviously is much larger than that. The way you're going to get smaller homes is because developers decide how much they want to make, how large they want to make it. If you want to have smaller homes, then you're going to have higher density. And the only way we're going to meet our arena numbers, and I'm fairly certain that our appeal, I'm sure we'll give it our best try, but the history of the appeals has been that they are not very successful. The only way we're going to meet our arena numbers is to rezone areas that don't allow for housing into housing, and we're going to have to look at higher density. We may not be Manhattan, but it's probably going to be higher than what we've experienced in the past. That's it.
Gary, you don't have to wait.
So I had a few comments. So first of all, I think we talked about it a little bit. I think community outreach and education is probably going to be one of the most important with this effort over above almost anything we've ever done. And I'm glad that the city has started that already with the city webpage, and I think they did a really nice job. But I think as the city and the community starts to see maybe changes and housing projects and rezoning take place, the more that we can educate and communicate either through meetings like this or all the forums that Cindy mentioned, I think that's going to be critical. So, I want to just do a shout out that that's a good and great start. Retail analysis, I think we've said a lot about that, and the redefinition of mixed use. And 3 years after we did the last economic analysis and retail analysis, I think we're a lot smarter. And how we think about our mix of sales tax generation, retail, and our current zoning standards, I think that's all going to shake out as it comes forward. And I think we're all going to be a little bit smarter about what makes a lively shopping center than we were before. And
We're going to go on for a while.
so I think that's all going to be a lot easier to pull together. One thing, since it is an 8-year cycle, and even though it's only a couple years old, it seems like it might be appropriate sometime in the next 8 years to take another look at the inclusionary housing ordinance. As Chair Wallace mentioned, our current 15% affordable housing requirement requires almost a 7 or 6 times build to get that 15%. I don't know if it makes sense that at some point over the next 8 years, we should look at that, because, if we're going to build any units, we shouldn't give away any affordable housing units at all if possible. So it may be fine the way it is, but it does seem like at some point over the next housing cycle, it should be looked at. It might be stale by 2031. So I think that's something we ought to look at. And then the only other question, maybe it should have been a question more than anything else, since this is moving into the 6th cycle, I guess my question is, are there any affordable housing units that are starting to roll off of their affordable housing cycle? And are they now going to become no longer affordable? And does that become an issue for the city that needs to be addressed? And is there a program where we start to work with those property owners to maybe re-up and keep them affordable for another cycle or indefinitely? And if there is a program, that's great. If there isn't a program, should that also be a goal or a policy of the city to do something to try and make sure that we don't lose any affordable housing? Because I don't think we want to fall farther behind than we already are. And those are my comments for tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, just want to make sure. Was there a question in there, Gary? I was writing some
I
stuff.
think that last comment was a question comment kind of wrapped up together on any housing sites any housing units that may be expiring.
There are.
Okay.
There's always, at time works against you. There's going to be something there between now and 2031. If not, we're at least going to be close. And I wouldn't even try to imagine what kind of legislation is going to come between now and 2031. Charge us double for allowing it to be a day older. There's no council action required on this. We're going to go into another exciting one here in a minute. I just would ask specifically to keep an eye on that 2027 mid-cycle review. I think things are going to change drastically with the 6th cycle on how things get done, because the emphasis is really on producing more than ever before, the people that produce. I'd also like to ask, if possible, and I don't know why I don't do it, I sit on ABAG, but get a copy of option 6A, whatever it was, because the reality is we have a chance of making that one. We have nobody has a chance of making 8 except Santa Clara, but that's the way it goes. And I think it was very well stated with Sabina at the beginning. We still got to learn how to live with what they're probably going to get us. And if it gets better, hey, it gets better. Anyway, let's move on to 3.2, unless I don't see any other burning. Rick Marks, you had something?
It's not exactly burning, but it's something I'd like us to consider at some point. The ability of cities to produce housing in largely or significantly built out cities is not just a choice between retail and housing. It's a choice between offices, retail, and housing. You know, the future of the workplace is sort of in question now. You read articles that say that a lot of companies are completely going to work at home. Some are going to come to the office 3 days a week. Throughout the world, cities are taking a look at how do you, and does it make sense to convert office space to housing? To some extent, the North Camino Ramon specific plan did a very good job on BR6 site of anticipating that. We should also take a look at large office buildings that may or may not be viable as completely office, and consider vertically mixed housing and office. You can come up with smaller sized units, which may appeal to the group that Council Member Zafar was talking about. But those buildings are here, they're not likely to get torn down. What is their future use is something we should look at relative to our needs.
Well put, Rick. I think that's something you guys will be hearing about when we move to hit you with another date for this meeting in August. Let's move on to the joint public hearing, City Village, Bishop Ranch 6, Development Proposals, Specific Plan Amendment 21-800-1, Major Subdivision Application 21-900-2, Development Plan 21-300-2, Architecture Review 21-200-7, Initial Study 21-250-1. Anybody ever see the movie The Thing? That reminds me of the guy quoting that nomenclature of about 80 numbers. It's, oh yeah, that one. Anyway, we're going to have a staff report from Cindy Yee, and then we're going to hear from the applicant. Then the third thing we'll do is have just what we just did. The council and commissioners ask clarifying questions. Then we'll open the public hearing. So Cindy, you have the floor. This is your night. Give us 3.2. And you're on mute. Oh, should have stayed on mute. It was a great speech.
Thank you. I have another presentation that I'd like to share with you as well. So let me go ahead and hopefully pull up the right screen. Can you see my PowerPoint? Perhaps not.
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you can.
We see
Okay.
it.
And I didn't have it on mute, Sabina, much.
Okay, so this is the first public hearing on the City Village Development Proposal. We've put this together as a joint City Council and Planning Commission hearing so that we can provide both the Council and Commission the same introduction to the project. And I'll go ahead and just our objective this evening is just to really provide you with the first hearing to review the project proposal, receive feedback from the commission and council, and then to continue the hearing to the next planning commission hearing scheduled for August 17th. So just a quick presentation on the location. 2400 to 2440 Camino Ramon is the site location. It's bound by Norris Canyon Road and Executive Parkway, a 31-acre site in Bishop Ranch. It's within the North Camino Ramon specific plan area, which is an area of the city that's comprised of 295 acres. Within that specific plan area, this Bishop Ranch 6 location, where City Village is proposed, is currently identified as Bishop Ranch Mixed Use Land Use Destination. The site currently allows for a mix of commercial and residential uses, and 20 dwelling units per acre is the minimum residential density currently for BRMU, with a maximum height of 85 feet or 5 stories. And
if you don't answer that one question I'm about to ask about 8,000 or 80,000 square foot lots, I'm going to ask it after the presentation. What the heck is that?
minimum lot size?
Yeah.
So That's the standard development area to redevelop a project.
Okay.
Is to have at least
Because when I saw that, I saw 80,000 square foot lots and I'm going, oh, that'll go over. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's,
You skipped it. I'm going to ask the question anyway, so go ahead.
so that's the current standard for BRMU.
Okay.
In terms of the surrounding area, as you can see, its proximity to the other community facilities in that surrounding area, within a half-mile radius, there's quite a few areas that the project site is you can walk to. So as far as just the basic description of the proposal, there's 404 total residential units, a variety of single family and multifamily units. The proposal is for 18.5 dwelling units per net acre. And in addition to the 404 units, there's a 2-acre park site that's identified on the southeast corner of the project. And then another tot lot that has been added since the last time this body has reviewed it. That's on the northern part of the development. There's also an affordable housing component as part of this project that will include a mix of units on site and a payment of in lieu fees. So as part of the application, in addition to the development applications, there's a request for an amendment to the North Camino Ramon specific plan. The proposal includes a amendment from BRMU to mixed use density residential. The new density range proposed would be 14 to 30 dwelling units per acre. It would also include an update to the inclusionary housing requirements in the specific plan, which would align with the city's citywide inclusionary housing ordinance. And then there's associated graphs and text amendments that have to also align as part of the proposed project. The application includes a development plan proposal, a application to subdivide the property to create the 404 units, architecture review, tree removal, and then environmental review through the CEQA process. And then with any specific plan amendments that occur in San Ramon, Measure G is required of this project where there's a minimum of 3 public hearings before the Planning Commission and the City Council before any action can be taken on the specific plan amendment. It requires a supermajority vote from the Planning Commission in favor of the amendment to the City Council. Also has to approve it on a 4/5 vote in order to adopt the amendment to the specific plan. The CEQA process for this project would take the current North Camino Ramon specific plan environmental impact report and prepare an addendum to that EIR document. And so we're currently in the process of preparing that document right now and will be presented at the next Planning Commission meeting. And I know the applicant's going to go through this project site plan, but again, just to orient you to this map, Camino Ramon is on the top of your screen, Norris Canyon Road on the left, and Executive Parkway on the right. You can see the park site at that southeast corner, and then the primary entrances into the project site from Camino Ramon, and then from Norris Canyon through to Executive Parkway, and then the residential units surrounding those various streets. As far as the public review process, you'll recall that we've had a few study sessions. One is a joint meeting with the City Council and Planning Commission in February, and then a separate Planning Commission study session in March. The Housing Advisory Committee has also reviewed this application. They are recommending adoption of the updated affordable housing policy and approval of the affordable housing plan proposed by the applicant. We also had a City Council and Parks and Community Services Commission review of the conceptual park proposal in April. The Architecture Review Board reviewed the project in May and has recommended final architectural approval of the architecture and conceptual approval of the landscape plans. They've provided comments as part of their review. The project was deemed complete in May, and the next steps moving forward is the addendum to the environmental impact report, and then the series of public hearings required through Measure G. So thus far, we've received quite a bit of feedback through these joint study sessions, through the ARB and the Housing Advisory Committee. Some of the general feedback that we've received at the joint study sessions with Planning Commission and with City Council is generally supporting the amendment to the specific plan. The appropriateness of the mix of residential units proposed, and the number of units and the location within the specific plan. Also support for the 2-acre park, and then consideration of additional park amenities and pedestrian connections to the city's walking district. There was also some comments about adding open space and recreational amenities in the northern part of the subdivision, closer to where the multifamily townhomes are located. And then to provide some additional information on what this project's impacts will be to traffic, school, affordable housing, and retail uses. And all of those will be, again, done as part of the next public hearing with the Planning Commission. So we'll have a full report as part of the CEQA analysis that can speak to these impacts. And then general feedback that we received from the City Council and Parks Commission study session, again, supportive of the 2-acre park and the concept of a combination of on-site park development and the payment of in lieu fees as the project's measures to meet the city's parkland dedication requirements. There was support for the 1/4-acre private park near the townhomes, but no support to allow for credit of that park area to be counted towards the project's parkland dedication. And then to really consider the connections to the streetscapes and the integration with the walking district that the city's formulating currently. They wanted to create stronger pedestrian connections with the surrounding neighborhood and to really look at opportunities to widen that streetscape and on those private roadways. There was also conversations about the long-term maintenance responsibilities of the 2-acre park, how the HOA will ultimately be able to support the long-term maintenance of the park, and then whether or not additional park amenities should be included at this location, such as restroom facilities. So as far as project architecture, just to run through really quickly, there's a variety of renderings here on the row houses, the courtyard style homes, and the multifamily townhomes. You can see it's generally modern architecture, a lot of architectural elements to create variety and interest on the building elevations. As far as the streetscapes, I know the applicant will be going through this in more detail, but we've added some additional modifications to what you previously saw in the study sessions, adding wider sidewalks, landscaping, amenities, places of interest such as benches and trellises along those walking paths. And then just, some additional views of the streetscape and how those will look like and appear in the from various vantage points of the private and public streets. And then here's a rendering of the 2-acre park at the corner of Executive Parkway and Camino Ramon. This rendering hasn't changed too much from what you previously saw. We are still working on finalizing the park amenities, and so that conversation will continue as we move into the next public hearings after we get some feedback from the Parks Commission. But generally, what has currently been proposed is an active park with play structures and pickleball courts, and then passive areas where you have meadows and seating and bench areas for gathering spaces. Something new, one of the recommendations from the previous study session was to incorporate some additional recreational amenities in the multifamily area. And this is the proposed tot lot that the applicant has incorporated into their site plan. You can see it's in just north of Street B along this north-south connection on Street A. The location of the tot lot is going to be central to the townhomes. So just another note on the park plan, we are looking at further evaluating the role of the HOA in terms of the long-term maintenance, how the use of the park will look like in the long term, and then the cost of the park and the improvements. We are considering a option for the city to own and manage the 2-acre park, and so those conversations are ongoing. We will provide an update at a subsequent Planning Commission and City Council hearing following some additional conversations that we'll have on the park amenities and the long-term maintenance. As far as the proposed inclusionary housing policy, as I mentioned, the current North Camino Ramon specific plan has an inclusionary policy that requires a 25% inclusionary requirement for any projects within that specific plan area that plans to develop residential. The specific plan requires 15% of the units to be constructed on site and then 10% of the units to be paid as an in lieu fee. So that's the current inclusionary policy. There's been a number of changes to state law since 2012 when the specific plan was adopted. One of those being that the cities can now actually require rental apartments and multifamily units to actually set aside residential units. And so it's allowed the city to reevaluate what would best serve as an inclusionary policy citywide. And so in 2019, the city adopted an inclusionary ordinance that citywide looked at various types of developments, having a specific standard for multifamily and then for single family detached. And what we're recommending is that the North Camino Ramon specific plan be updated to align with the citywide ordinance. For this particular project, what that would mean is that you'll get a variety of low, very low, and moderate income units in the multifamily attached townhomes. In total, there will be 20 units that will be set aside and required to be sold to these various income categories. And there will be a mix of 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom units in that category. So tonight's goal is really just to provide, again, a initial introduction to the project because our public hearing does require the 3 public hearings before the Planning Commission and the City Council. We're hoping to receive feedback on the project tonight and then take public testimony, and then continue the public hearing to August 17th for additional review. So that will be August 17th will be that next second public hearing that's scheduled. We would then have a third public hearing following that in September. That then will hopefully include a recommendation to City Council on the project. City Council will then have public hearings regarding the specific plan amendment following the Planning Commission's recommendation. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I know the applicant also has a presentation as well that they would like to provide the joint council and commission. I can take questions now, or we can certainly.
Actually, the way we have it set up, Cindy, is we're going to hear the applicant's presentation after you, and then the council and commission have clarifying questions of staff. But in light of the time, I mean, we usually take a break at 9 when we start at 7. We started at 5. It's almost 7. Rather than break it in half, where we have the presentation, then take a break and come back and ask questions, I would ask, with the concurrence of commission and council, we take 5 now, allow them to set up, come back, hear the presentation, and ask our questions. Anyone have a problem with that? I don't see any hands except Scott Rennick, and you better be here this time. Okay, we'll be back. Christina, give us 5 minutes. We'll come back from the break and hear the applicant. Okay, Christina, are we getting close? Let's herd the cats. And Cindy, when she gets us back online, you can introduce who's going to be the first speaker or what, they can pass the torch.
I am back. If
Now we need to record it. That Christina's holding all the power. Oh, look at that. Everybody's here. There you are. Are we back on, Christina?
Yes, you are live.
Okay, welcome back. We are out of our break, and I would turn the floor over to Cindy Yee, and she will introduce the applicants.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to turn it right over to Denise Cunningham with Summerhill Homes, and she can introduce her team. I've got the PowerPoint presentation, so I'll bring that up while I turn it over to her.
Okay, Denise, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members, planning commissioners. I'm Denise Cunningham, VP of Development with Summerhill Homes. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and I'd also like to thank staff for their continued efforts. It's been very helpful. We also have Robert Freed, the Summerhill's CEO, and Kevin Ebrahimi, the Senior VP of Development. Jerry Engen with Sunset Development is also here this evening, and we're all available to answer questions. And then for those of you who are not familiar with Summerhill Homes, Summerhill is a private home builder. We've been in business for over 40 years and delivered over 6,000 new homes during this time, primarily in the Bay Area. And our headquarters are right here in San Ramon at Bishop Ranch 8. And I'd also like to turn this over to Jerry to say a few words, and then I will come back and continue with the presentation.
Okay, Jerry. Oh my goodness.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Good evening, Mayor Hudson, Chair Wallace, members of the Planning Commission and City Council. For the record, my name is Jerry Engen, Senior VP of Development and Construction for Sunset Development. So I wanted to, remind everybody that we have been working very closely with Summerhill through this whole process, and will continue to do so through construction. As Denise stated, and will show in her presentation, as well as what staff has mentioned, there have been numerous meetings, public meetings, as well as meetings with staff so far to date. And Sunset's really impressed with how Summerhill has responded and adjusted their plans based on all of the various stakeholder input. Not all of the comments to date or views were aligned. So Summerhill really struck a well thought through balance, between the disparate comments and views, while delivering a high quality project that really, based on their expertise, meets the demands of the market and will be a terrific complement to City Walk in the core of the city. Sunset is in complete support of this project and all of the modifications made to the plans. I'm available to answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, thank you. Who is next?
Back to me. Thank you, Jerry. Next slide, please, Cindy. For the benefit of people who haven't been at the previous meetings that we've talked about, I thought I'd give just a quick overview and then move on to the changes that we have made in response to comments that we've received. And Cindy has done such a fabulous job. I'll try not to be too repetitive. So this is the site plan. Again, it's on Camino Ramon on the west side between Norris Canyon and Executive Parkway. Next slide, please. And this is the site plan. We have a proposed community of 404 for sale homes with 3 unique product types. We have attached townhomes, we have detached row homes, and detached court homes. And we feel this mix really creates a diversity of housing for a wide range of buyers. All of the homes in the community have 2-car attached garages and generous decks. And the home types are grouped into neighborhoods within the community. Next slide, please. This is an artist's rendering of the townhomes, and you can see the key map at the bottom will show you the location. The townhomes are generally grouped in the northeastern portion of the site. It's just a short walk to Crow Canyon Commons. And these are 3-story townhomes, attached townhomes. Next slide, please. And again, you can see the key map at the bottom will show you where we're looking. These townhomes lay out with the front doors along these landscaped paseos, which really provide connectivity throughout the entire community. So the front doors face the landscape paseos, and the garages are accessed from a shared drive aisle in the rear. Next slide, please. And some of these paseos provide a link to the walking trail along Camino Ramon. We've really made a big effort for connectivity and walkability throughout the neighborhood. And this exhibit shows you a seating area, a sample of the seating areas that connect to paseos throughout the community and at 4 different locations along Camino Ramon. Next slide, please. So this is a rendering of the row homes. Again, you can see the key map at the bottom of the screen. These homes are located on the southeastern portion of the property, closest to the new park. And this view is actually taken from the park, looking at the looking at the row homes. These are all 3-story detached single-family homes. And in response to previous comments, we've also included an option for an elevator in one of the units, again, to address previous comments. Next slide, please. And similar to the townhomes, the row homes also have their front doors off these shared paseos, these landscape paseos. And each row home also includes a private deck or side yard. And the drive aisles in the back also provide access to the garages. Next slide, please. And again, for connectivity and gathering spots, we've included another area adjacent to the townhomes at some of the paseos and adjacent to the row homes for seating areas, gathering areas, and stairs into the new community. Next slide, please. So this is a view of our court homes. Again, you can see the key map on the bottom of the screen. And these are located primarily on the western edge of the property. The courts are 2- and 3-story single-family homes. And some of these include generous rooftop decks as well. Next slide, please. So the layout of the court homes, the courts actually surround a shared motor court, and the doors, some of them interior access from the courtyard. Next slide, please. And all along A Street, which is the major north-south connection through the community, aside from Camino Ramon, all of the court homes actually have front doors that face A Street, again, to help engage this public space. Next slide, please. And as Cindy mentioned, as part of this project, we are proposing a 2-acre public park at the corner of Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway. And this location was selected because it really balances visibility and convenience to the public access. It complements the vision of the walking district by extending the meandering paths along Camino Ramon. And it's also closest to the adjacent businesses for availability of these employees to use the park during daytime hours. Next slide, please. And as we've all mentioned this evening, this will actually be our 8th public meeting. We've had multiple submittals to date, and we do really appreciate all of the comments that we've received. We have worked hard with our design team to be responsive and incorporate these changes into the plans. And I'd like to go through some of those now. Next slide, please. So beginning with the park, again, this is located at Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway. And one of the comments that we had received was how the housing interacts with the park and to show the connectivity. And as you can see on the top of the screen, these are our detached row homes, and all of the front doors and porches and patios face towards the park to engage this public space. It also shows all the connectivity from different points throughout the site that surround both all the perimeter of the site and interior to the site for easy access and a different experience and convenience for everybody that would like to use the park. We feel like we've created a destination and gathering place easily accessed from the walking paths along Camino Ramon and A Street, and it really integrates well into the future City Walk plans. And I'll show you that in the future slides. In addition to that, we've included a monument sign on the corner of Camino Ramon and Executive Parkway. Next slide. And so this slide shows some imagery that could be used in the park. And we'll continue to work with the city and the Parks Commission on the desired amenities and programming for the park. And for this exhibit, we've really included a combination of active uses and passive uses, and really all of these could be easily incorporated into that park. Next slide, please. So this is a sample, or this is an exhibit that shows the larger area, both City Village and City Walk. And one of the comments, again, was how the housing will interact with the surrounding community. And this slide shows the larger community. So you can see City Village on the left and City Walk on the right. And this is really a continuation, this 2-acre park and the smaller 1/4-acre park along A Street are a continuation of the parks throughout City Walk, and really provides a destination or a stopping route along the way. It extends the walking paths that are generously landscaped with good setbacks, and also along the entire frontage of Norris Canyon on our property. There's multiple walking loops that you could use in this area. You could enter at the main entry at Camino Ramon and circle back to the park, or even take a longer loop and go to Norris Canyon and circle back through A Street. So this really illustrates the connections, both internal and outside the neighborhood, and how this interacts to the future City Walk and also the walking district. These circles on here represent a 1/4 mile. So really within anywhere that you live within the community, you're really just in a short 5 to 10 minute walk to get to any of the nearby amenities. Additionally, we were asked at earlier meetings about the vehicular circulation. And so you can see the streets represented on this slide as well. And it shows the grid pattern and all of the, there's easy access throughout the community so that you don't need to take a long circuitous drive to get in or out of the community. There's several entrances. Next slide, please. So again, among the comments that we received, it was a request to emphasize the main entries to create a welcoming environment and a sense of arrival. And this rendering illustrates how we've revised the entry off of Camino Ramon. By widening this entrance, we've added space for seating. And there's actually, with this seating and the other notes that I've shown you, 6 spots along Camino Ramon for gathering or entrance into the neighborhood. And this is in addition to all of the park space. We've also included monument signage at the front and decorative paving, in addition to bulb outs that allows for some accent trees and enhanced landscaping. Next slide, please. And so this rendering, again, I'll refer you to the key map. This is on Camino Ramon, looking down the walking path facing south. You can see the key map. And so this is a little north of the main entry. And what we've done is bring the stairs down to the walking path, providing seating and gathering areas at the sidewalk level and paved trail. So this provides accessibility and inclusiveness. The landscape medium also varies from about 8 to 20 feet as it meanders down the trail. And we've included 2 rows of trees to really frame the walking path. Next slide, please. So this is Street A. I'll refer you again to the key map at the bottom. Street A runs from Norris Canyon to Executive Parkway. And this is a little less than halfway down this path. As Cindy mentioned previously, we were asked to look at adding some more green space in this area. And we were able to find a way to incorporate a 1/4 acre park in this area as well. And so what we've been able to do is put additional green space, tot lot, and other features in this park area. And one of the requests, again, was to widen this area, make it a more friendly walking environment. And so we've been able to increase the width of the sidewalk on the east side of the street to 8 feet, which is the same width as the walking path along Camino Ramon. So this is a fairly wide walking path, and we've provided a bulb out as well, which also adds some more greenery and more curvature to the road here. We've done all this, and we've been able to still maintain a 5-foot sidewalk and parkway on the west side of the street, and that's where the front doors face from the court homes. We were also able to add more seating and benches along the entirety of A Street. Again, so there's more gathering spaces for neighbors to meet and connect, or just for someone to sit and rest as they're walking through the area. Next slide, please. And this is a plan view of the 1/4 acre park, and it shows some of the amenities in this area. There's generous lawn areas and green space. We have barbecues, a tot lot, and a lot of gathering areas and some picnic benches. Next slide, please. So now we are at the other end of A Street. This is at Executive Parkway and A Street. And again, to further address the similar questions and comments that we received regarding a sense of place and creating a welcoming environment, we've carried some of those features to all of the entries. So we have the entry monument at this location and the decorative paving. And we've also added additional seating areas to A Street along the park here. As I mentioned earlier, we really appreciate the comments we've received to date at the previous meetings over the last 6 months. And we believe that these revisions and refinements have enhanced the project. So I'll conclude the presentation. We're available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Denise. Council and commission questions before we open public comment. And let me see what we have here. I don't have any commissioners, or there's a hand went up somewhere. Eric, start us off.
Here's my question. Is at this point that you want just clarifying questions or comments on the project?
Clarifying questions. The comments will come after we set the public hearing for later.
All right, then I'll withhold my comments until then.
Did I say comments? Must be getting late. I'm sorry. I see Sridhar.
Question marks too.
Hi, lately from the community, I keep receiving about dog parks. That's like, especially after this post-COVID, that's a constant question. I keep requesting, like new requests for the dog parks. I'm just wondering, what is the closest proximity of the dog park from this location? Just curious to know.
Memorial Park.
You have any info right now, but otherwise we can.
Well, there's not one in Central Park. And the closest one I can think of is Del Mar.
No, Memorial Park would be closer.
Yeah.
Memorial Park, if you go up the hill, but that's an uphill, Scott. That's no, I'm sorry.
Hey, he said closest.
It's
Okay.
Whole Iron Horse Trail, it's a dog park. I didn't want to put it that way, but there isn't a specific dog park like the one we put out in Doherty Valley or the one we have on Del Mar or Memorial. But I'll just leave it at that. We're asking questions. So you're asking, what's the closest one? I think those are it, correct? I don't see anybody. I see a bunch of heads shaking, so that's it. Continue, Sridhar.
Thanks.
Okay. Eric, you've asked your question, or Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some clarification questions about Street A. It's my understanding that it is a private street, and it allows parking on only one side of the street. Is that correct?
I will rely on our team to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have parking on both sides of the street. And we'll have a public access easement over the street and the sidewalk. So it's not inclusive to just the community.
Okay, that answers another question that I had. On plan sheet SP13, which was the walking district plan, the legend says, the third item on the legend talks about the proposed parkway with meandering trail. And so I think you've clarified this with your comment, but that area is now open to the general public as well as to residents of the community.
The entire community is open to the greater community. So yes, all of Street A.
All of Street A to all of San Ramon residents.
All of San Ramon residents. Okay. There wouldn't be any impediment to someone walking through the Paseos from Camino Ramon as well.
Okay, those are my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, did you just not take your hand down, or you have a question before I call Sabina Zafar?
I put my hand down. I'm just a little slower on the draw tonight.
Okay, that's why I gave you a break to refresh.
Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Councilmember Zafar.
Yeah, so one clarifying question is, we're also being asked to consider the North Camino Ramon specific, the vision policy 2.3, and say maybe replace it with our affordable housing. That's also one of the asks tonight. Or the IHO, what are we calling it?
Cindy?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So as part of this application, there's a specific plan amendment, and one of the edits to the specific plan would be to replace the current housing, inclusionary housing policy in the specific plan with essentially what would match the city's inclusionary housing ordinance policy.
And right now, this is dictated by the North Camino Ramon specific plan, this specific document.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Kuznick.
Thank you. Just a really quick question. I noticed that as we were going through some of the changes in the plans, the question about ADA access, that the Paseos step down to the walkways, and then those interesting walkways in the park. I think as we look at either our aging population with mobility issues or a very young population, hopefully with baby strollers, stairs and peculiar, like the rocks and the little boardwalk thing in the park, do represent a bit of a challenge. So will there be friendlier access points other than steps and stairs?
Well, sure. The stairs occur at 4 different locations at the Paseos. There's also the main entry to the community off of Camino Ramon, and that's does not have any stairs and would be ADA accessible. Again, with all of the entry points into the park, there's a combination. There's a little bridge, there's some stepping stones. And these are all proposed at this time as we go through the park development and programming. So there's multiple access points. And some of those stepping stones were more interactive features in the park.
I have one more quick question if I could. In
You're
going
on
through,
mute. Did you say something before the quick question? You could do a long question. They don't have to be quick.
well,
In fact, we
it-
kind of go against quick questions here. Go ahead.
all right. My commissioners will say that's probably true. So the question that I had as I was walking there around the area today is, there is currently a walkway that is part of the Bishop Ranch office, and it's a very robust 3-mile loop around that whole series of buildings. So is it your development's plan to rip out what is currently there along Camino Ramon and then add in something new?
Yes.
Or does it not go that far?
No, with the grading and the utilities, it would probably be all redone and regraded.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, those are the questions. Seeing no other questions, I think it's time that we open the public hearing. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Well, more of a technical question for the staff. We had a lot of discussion on the last agenda item on the general plan update about meeting arena numbers and affordable housing numbers and things like that. So back to what Council Member Zafar was talking about, or what I picked up from that question, in the inclusionary housing policy, we're supposed to set aside, or there's 25% can be dedicated as affordable, 15% to be constructed, 10% paid as in lieu of. Is that an option to pay in lieu of, or is it something that the developer applies and is it up to the discretion of the city to approve? We're having a hard time meeting our affordable numbers. Is it the developer's discretion as to whether or not they do that last 10%, which might be 40 units in this case?
Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, sure, through the mayor. So the specific plan amendment is amending the current inclusionary housing policy. So there's a couple of different considerations that are being requested as part of this application. One, if the council and planning commission supports the change to the updated inclusionary housing policy, the current inclusionary housing policy is a 15% requirement for multifamily units. And then it's a 10% in lieu fee or on-site units for single family detached homes. The way that the inclusionary housing ordinance is structured is that the applicant can apply for either or as part of their affordable housing plan. And then the planning commission typically would consider that as part of their entitlement review to determine if the affordable housing plan is in line with the inclusionary policy that's in place. And so the ordinance, the way that it's written currently gives an option to meet the single family detached requirement either through payment of in lieu fee or set aside of units.
Okay.
And that will be reviewed by the planning commission.
Well, once the policy is adopted as part of the specific plan amendment, then the planning commission can consider that the affordable housing plan and whether it meets the new policy that's created.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we will open the public hearing. Public comments. If you wish to speak under public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone. When it's your turn to talk, you will be called upon by name if provided. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person and a clock will be running on the Zoom screen. Still only one person wants to chime in. The speaker's microphone will be muted once the allotted time has expired. Let's bring in, I believe that's caller in user 1.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I'm gonna speak fast because I only have 3 minutes and I want to get everything in. So first of all, I want to say a little bit of disclosure. Nothing against the builder. The developer actually sounds like a pretty decent company. But I just want to say that the reason why the citizens, the residents may have concerns and restrained thoughts, it's because of the politicians that are pushing have dubious characters, such as Senator Scott Wiener, who is trying to push the criminalization of prostitution and psychedelic drugs. These are very serious community impacting laws. And he's also the leader of affordable housing. So I want to, request that everyone, let's be honest here. If there is an imbalance of supply and demand, why is it that we're going along with the narrative of supply? Why isn't the problem demand? If we can be honest and know that the problem is the demand, then we can know that, this is how to solve a demand problem. There are a lot of foreign buyers who are coming in with millions of cash. So then we need to make sure that they cannot buy up as many units as possible, or we're still going to have an imbalance of supply and demand, no matter how many affordable housing we build. Council members of ours said that, people want to live in affordable housing. No, people don't want to live in affordable housing. People want to live in quality lifestyle communities, but they want to be able to afford it. Nobody wants to owe so much money to live what they want to enjoy. That's a problem. So that's why she said that in Alabama, you can have a really large home, but it's affordable. But here it's the opposite. And I blame that on the demand part. I have lived in Manhattan. Manhattan housing, living sucks because a lot of those units, when they become old, they're not updated. We need to make sure that the developers tell us how they are going to require the residents to update their apartments. So then 10, 15 years down the road, we're not going to be stuck with, wearing down housings that are dangerous, that are stinky, that are smelly because the trash aren't empty because it's inconvenient. A lot of the Asian, they are not affordable. In Asia, these small units are actually extremely expensive. And they have planned that, you can drop your trash and then there's a trash chute that will shoot directly to the trash collector because people are so lazy. How do you make sure that people live according to our quality of living here currently? And also,
I'm gonna end you with that one. Thank you for your comments. I don't see any other attendees wishing to speak. Just a point of order, because I was asked earlier if there'll be a time for comments. The last thing that we do after the council takes a roll call vote will be comments from the council and the commissioners. So we have closed, I take it back. There is one other public comment that I know of for sure. Christina, is that correct? One written one on this item? You have it in your packets? Somebody living close to one of our commissioners. I'll leave him alone. I won't pick on him. But you darn well better know what that letter says, because you're probably going to get quizzed. That just one, I'm kind of looking just to see if any other attendees do. Seeing none, we will close the public comment or the public hearing. We do need to do this by motion. And this is just the council. I'll move the item along. I move to close the public hearing and to set the next public hearing on this item before the Planning Commission for August 17th, 2021.
I'll second.
I have a second, Perkins. Is there any just council discussion on this motion? Seeing none, let's do the roll call vote and get into the all-important discussion with our commissioners. You have it, Christina.
Councilmember Armstrong,
Yes.
Councilmember Veros,
Yes.
Councilmember Safar,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perkins,
Yes.
Mayor Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you. Those 5-0.
Okay, the item now is before is council discussion and commissioner discussions. Eric, I know you had something earlier. Do you still have it, or did we wear you out?
I still have it.
Go.
Floor's mine. I'm going to do a riff off of what Councilmember Armstrong brought up, which was the affordable housing component of this plan. If the idea for this development was to put in high-end housing in an urban setting, then it does that. These are clearly high-end housing. You're in the middle of the urban core. And since at least 2010, we've been trying to encourage housing down in the core to keep the pressure off the outskirts of the city on both the west and the east sides. My concern, and I brought this up at an earlier planning commission meeting, is the way the affordable housing is structured. What they're proposing to do is to comply with the basic requirements of the affordable housing, the inclusionary housing ordinance. But I have questions about whether that's the best result in this case. I've looked at the numbers for the very low and moderate income prices for these homes, what someone would be able to pay. And I've had my numbers checked with another commissioner who actually knows math much better than I do. The short version is that for the very low income units, the developer is going to be subsidizing to the tune of about $600,000 to $700,000 per unit. I mentioned that number at the last meeting we had with the developer, and the feedback I got was the number is basically accurate. If you spread the subsidy across all 20 units, the two of us in the commission came up with a number of $12 million in subsidies. Now, leaving aside the optics of having someone who makes $65,000 a year live in $1 million house, the question is whether that $12 million subsidy could be put to better use in the city. I know that Dublin has worked out a deal with a developer whereby they have foregone on-site affordable housing and taken money that would otherwise be attributable to that. And they are partnering with a affordable housing entity to create 100% affordable housing on property in Dublin. That would be far in excess of what they could get if they had the developer do on-site development. I don't know what we could do with the $12 million, but certainly we could use it towards affordable housing. And Commissioner Alpert brought up another idea tonight. And that is, as the mayor pointed out, we have a number of units that are coming off affordable housing in the next housing cycle. With that $12 million, we presumably could cut a deal with those people to continue the affordable housing on those units for a period of time, thereby creating additional real affordable housing that meets the needs of those people who make $65,000 or $85,000. Now, the city attorney and I have a professional disagreement about whether we can do this. My reading of the inclusionary housing ordinance allows the city to reach an agreement with the developer. It can't require the developer to pay this type of money and forego on-site affordable housing. But my read of the affordable housing ordinance is that if the developer proposes it, the city is allowed to agree to that with the finding that what it is getting is at least equivalent to what it could get through on-site housing, which in this case is 20 units. So it came up obliquely at one of our other planning commission meetings. It has not been adopted in any formal way or made a formal proposal in any of the meetings. But since we had both the council and the planning commission here, and it's come up in discussions between me and other planning commissioners, I at least wanted to put it on the table as an item for discussion. The developer always has the option to turn us down on the subsidy payment and to go forward with putting 20 affordable units on the ground in this area. But I thought that between the optics and the money that was involved, that at least ought to be discussed at the commission city council level. And so that's why I'm putting it on the table right now. That's it.
Any other comments? I'll chime in. Actually, Dublin's not the only one doing it. We're discussing it. A large part of it isn't what the developer kicks in. A large part of it is what legislation's kicking forward in money. I mean, I think David Chu is a big proponent of this, and you're going to see even more legislation where the developer can use it and build that kind of a property. The problem before we start pushing that idea is, remember, there are other legislations. I'm looking to see who's on the it would be that he'd be here too. The other problem is there's other pieces of legislation. And when you start getting past 15 and 25 and 35 and 50% affordable housing, now you're up to 4 incentives, and they can choose what those incentives are. And actually, once you get over 50%, you get an additional incentive, which is 3 additional stories or 33 feet. and we start running into other problems, how we're going to put this together. But for this development here, I think they're hearing what you say. If you want to, if they want to take a look at it, fine. I'm still a bigger proponent of when we start trying to buy into the very low, that we get a project that wants to do it similar to Aspenwood or what Rome's looking at, or the project that I told you, and I still think is very viable because it's been done in Pittsburgh and David Chu did it in San Francisco, and that's using hotels when they've hit the end of their economic life. But you know, that's why we give all the easy things to the Planning Commission, so that we don't have to do this stuff. We leave it all to you to discuss it, because the world is changing so fast, Eric. I wouldn't want your job. I don't know if I want, well, no, I won't go there. But I mean, the reality is, I don't know what SB 9 or 8, I started looking at that. That's why I asked the question about 80,000 square feet. Is that going to change anything if that gets through? So yeah, you got your hands full. There's always going to be the 15 and 25 if you want to do more. If it makes sense to the developer, they'll do it. To me, it's only going to make sense unless there's some kind of subsidy coming down and some other kind of what's the word I'd use for it? Sell of money that would make sense. And I see Rob, oh, wait, I can't, I'm sorry, I've closed the public hearing. Robert, you're out. Well, Commissioner Freed wanted to chime in, but we're not going to let him. Anyone else on this? I got panelists. Let me get off of the Scott Perkins and then Sabina. You're on mute, Scott.
I want to thank Eric for bringing that concept to light. It certainly deserves more investigation, and there are opportunities in San Ramon. You know, the Rome project is still struggling with finance, and there may be an opportunity there to create a different product, in effect, you know, a low-income product, and with some additional financial help. So I think it's worthwhile for us to evaluate that and listen to a proposal from the developer if they think it's worthwhile, and we can make something that serves both our interests going forward. I like the other adjustments and changes that you know, the widening of the paths and the landscape that's associated with that. In general, I think you've made an effort to improve that appearance along those things, the aesthetics of those paseos and the Avenue A walking area. So thank you for that. And now my understanding is that in the process of doing this, that there will be a sidewalk on the south side of Norris Canyon that will go all the way to, was it Bishop Drive? Is that, you know, just before it goes over the overpass? So all along the Toyota frontage plus all along the the BR6 frontage. Is that correct?
Okay, wait a minute. Where did Cindy go on my? Cindy, go ahead. Chime in and get his question for it, and then it'll be Sabina.
I think that this was mentioned at the last joint session, but what I previously stated was that on the Toyota parcel, which is the parcel directly adjacent to BR6, the Toyota parcel goes from the shared property line of BR6 to the corner of Bishop Drive. As part of a previous project, there was a recorded access agreement that was made on the frontage of Norris Canyon Road, that at some point in time when the roadway sidewalk could connect all the way to Camino Ramon, that would trigger the requirement for Toyota to put in their portion of the sidewalk. And so as part of this project, because of the extension of the sidewalk on this project site, it will then trigger the option for the city to have Toyota install the sidewalk on their portion, thereby completing that sidewalk connection.
Thank you.
And thank you, Scott, for chiming in about the development plan. I think that's important that the developer know that we are feeling that you're getting very close, if not there, on the development plan. Sabina.
Yeah, so I would love for one of the commissioners to help me understand, but it seems like the North Camino specific plan talks about what we discussed earlier today, which we do want to create that balance between retail and housing and kind of that kind of space that we were talking about earlier, where we don't want to completely give up our retail to just housing as we get more people. So I don't know if somebody can help me understand what that vision was and how did that come about? Because I wasn't part of council then, and my understanding is from just reading this.
Let me hit the question. Do you want staff to answer it, or do you just kind of, because I have two commissioners who are going to chime in if they want to add their 2 points. Where's the direction you'd like to go right now? Because Lauren's unmuted if you want to hear from me.
If the commissioners would rather pass it to staff, that's fine. I wanted to understand. Probably
That's what I thought you were
did a
saying.
lot of work on coming up with that plan. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren, you unmuted. Why don't you chime in? And then I have Jean and Corey Edwards want to speak, and they can actually address it also. But go ahead, Lauren.
Sure. So one of the basic premises of this site as part of the North Camino Ramon specific plan was a consolidation of the existing office space that was associated with BR6 to the south. And the idea was to have the efficiency of being able to do structured parking between Bishop Ranch 8 and a new office area at the corner of Executive and Camino Ramon. And that would free up space at Norris Canyon and Camino Ramon for a housing development and park amenities and the like. So at the time under North Camino Ramon, it wasn't necessarily a removal of office, it was a reconfiguration of office. And so that was the basic premise at the time. And it also envisioned the possibility of a transit center to the west of this site and a few other amenities that could be incorporated into mixed use, such as coffee shops and the like. But again, there was still a large office component that was envisioned in the specific plan, and that's why the Bishop Ranch mixed use standard was created, because it still relied on office at the time. Does that help?
But we're going to get two other people to chime in too, Sabina. So come back to me with your hand after I hear from Jean and Corey. Corey, why don't you start it off? You've had your hand up a long time, and see if you can also address what she's asking.
I actually can't address what she's asking because I wasn't part of the development of the existing specific plan. I do just want to comment for Summerhill's benefit that I think we've got some really thoughtful and efficient design and some really efficient use of land in this project. The outdoor space that's provided to each of the units, I think, is well done. It's balconies, it's roof decks, it's a minimal of additional land use in addition to what's consumed by the actual residential use. And I think that's very beneficial, and it's the kind of design that allows there to be much more common area than there otherwise would be, and really allows the developer to be creating a new neighborhood in this area of San Ramon, which I think is very positive. I will comment that I think you've absolutely got to have restrooms for a park of this size. You're going to have small children. Restroom facilities are absolutely essential. And I earlier expressed a comment about having an HOA manage a privately owned open space area. I think that's something that we as a body need to think about. To Mr. Wallace's comments about the inclusionary zoning ordinance, I was the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee at the time that was passed. Something that I think we need to bear in mind is that one of the policy objectives that we were trying to accomplish when the inclusionary housing ordinance was passed was to create certainty and to create a policy in this city about what we were going to require developers to do in terms of delivering affordable housing. I think it is very difficult for the city. It's time consuming for the developer for every project to come through and have to negotiate its own one-off deal. We've passed the inclusionary housing ordinance, I think, for a reason. It's a compromise proposal. It's not perfect, but I think that, and obviously we're going to be discussing this as we move forward, But I do think that there is value in having certainty. There's value in having a known process for what the city's going to expect, what the developer is going to expect. That's how we're going to start making progress with our RENA numbers.
Okay, Jean, then I'll come back to Sabina after I make a comment. Go ahead, Jean.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So this is the portion we've been asked to give you some feedback and some comments. So I have a variety of comments on different topics, and I hope you can indulge me a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, I in other planning commission meetings, I have some serious concerns about traffic patterns and those sorts of things, and would like to, number one, suggest to this combined group that, you know, when Livermore redeveloped their downtown, they went from 2 lanes each direction down to 1 lane so that they could add to the walkability of that area. And I would like to people start thinking that this might be something that we need to do on Norris Canyon Road, that is a busy thoroughfare. It's one of the few places you can get over the freeway if you are biking and or walking. And that maybe it's worth looking at narrowing down those 4 lanes down to 2 and picking up additional space for parking or walkways, protected bike lanes. So that's number 1. And it just made it look better in Livermore. I'm concerned about this issue of the 2-acre park. And I'm gonna go out on my limb here and say, given our discussion about the RENA numbers and so forth, I'm kind of ready to suggest to the developer that perhaps the park should be reduced down to a smaller park, maybe, you know, ½ acre, and in fact build more housing, because the park just doesn't, for me, and yeah, I've thought this from the very beginning, I don't think the park is in the right place. It's on the intersection of what will be 2 busy streets. It just seems like it got thrown there really more as a bit of a marketing tool than necessarily an amenity for the neighbors. I am very much opposed to this becoming privately maintained. To Corey's point earlier, that I don't think an HOA is up to maintenance. And who do you call if the toilets are backed up? I mean, you know, we've had plenty of problems in our city parks with maintenance, but if you have a homeowners association and the toilets are flooding, you know, it's very problematic in my opinion, and would prefer us to not go in that direction. And finally, I would just like to say that as we are looking at this corridor for housing, one of the concerns I have is that we're creating right now this housing island. There's no Starbucks, there's no nothing, to use bad grammar, for where it is right now. There will be eventually, but the 2600 is got a 27-year build out. So there's going to be a big gap between this going in the very near future and what's going to happen around it. And I would just like to kind of have people think about what this looks like. And so maybe, you know, maybe it's not that we need the park. Maybe what we need is a little commercial stuff at the corner. Maybe it's a good spot for a coffee house or, and I know there's stuff on Crook Canyon Road, but if you were living there, walking across Norris to get down to the Pete's, right now that doesn't seem like an attractive walk. So those are really some quickie comments. I know we have many more people to hear from, so I'm trying to be brief. And the final question is, why do we have bioswales that are wider than our pedestrian walkways? And do they have to be that way? So as I was looking at the walkways, so thank you very much, Mayor.
Yeah, I was going to wait and come back to you, Sabina, but I got to chime in right now. I have to tell, first of all, if I were living there, I'd go to the coffee shop in 2600. It's been there for a while. It is close enough. I can tell you right now, you just gave the perfect reason why you don't put a bathroom in there. And if you put a bathroom there, all the emails I've got for all the parks at schools where people are actually doing soccer, baseball, and wanting a bathroom, they're going to come out in droves when you have a bathroom about 100 feet away, if that, at the transit center. Plus, the person in the baby lives there. I mean, they could take them back home, or actually, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I got too many grandkids where they don't go to those bathrooms. They leave you with the mess. I'd be a little leery about reducing the lanes. I just spent too much time sitting around in Danville, especially with schools and stuff going on. But I like the idea where you neck it down if you're doing something that I think's coming. Rick really got me. I almost chimed in when he said it about the commercial. And that's the bike parking in the future. Where I saw those cars, I'd be willing to bet by 2026, if this had been built out for 3 or 4 years, all of those spaces would be filled with bikes. I mean, the amount, I really like that in the development plan where you had bike parking on that smaller parking structure. You're going to see the increase. Well, we've seen 243% just during COVID. But when you start getting these electric bikes taking over as they are, they're going to be everywhere. The commercial end of it that Rick brought is the main reason why when Bishop Ranch came in with a 4,500 plan and said, we want to convert 800,000 square feet of commercial to housing, that I was able to convince the council, no, you can have the 4,500 and keep the 800. I don't know what's going to happen in 15 years, but I do have a pretty good indicator. Santa Clara is woefully under assessed in RENA, and it's going to catch up with them. And when they do, that's where the commercial buildings are for a lot of these companies that change over and get bought out are going to be surplus. And that's where you might see more of the commercial changing. I saw in Cincinnati, the Macy building is up for grabs, and it may get converted to condominiums in the downtown area. My personal feeling is the project is ready. It's done for the way it is. The 2-acre parcel of it, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, Gene, I probably would have said half the stuff you did. But then every time I go to Sydney, I walk through that little 2-acre park and I go, why am I still walking through this park? There's just certain little things at that size. That's about the minimum size we make for a park. The biggest mistake on this council as far as parks goes would be not fighting Abram Moore for that one behind what used to be Country Fair. Oh, we want all space. No, 2 acres is pretty much the park minimum for what they want. And this thing is really centrally located for a lot of the biking I'm going to see there. But what really has me excited also, Rick, if one of those companies wanted to come out of Silicon Valley and you've got BR9 or 7 right across the street, what a prime location. And we're putting in housing that's walkable for those people. I think the commercial end will continue to build up at 2,600. I'm seeing more and more of it. I'm impressed with how I thought that the city center is going to be dead during COVID. They're leasing again, and they keep, oh, I'm not supposed to tell that, am I, Jerry? So I won't tell you what else they're leasing, but I really think they have nailed it with this project. The point that I thought I heard from Scott, if we got some in lieu fees and we could make even more like we did when we bought out of Robert Storr, what he was doing, or Rome needed some more, or I'll tell you, if we can get $45,000 a unit for that Residence Inn and Marriott agreed, and we could do the lease period that gets us some kind of credit, and we've got a guy and the executive director there that wants to do it too, I think we've got an opportunity to use the money there. But for right now, I agree. I think this development plan is ready, and Gary, I'll give you the last word unless I can get some more hands, and Sabina will do it for council. Go ahead.
So I really don't have comments on the project. It was really more about the North Community Ramon specific plan, which I know we're supposed to be on the path to amending. And I know we didn't talk a lot about it tonight, and I think that's primarily, as I understand, we're going to be doing in August. And I would just ask that for the August meeting, there were a lot of comments and recommended changes from Summerhill, and I appreciate that, but I had a hard time seeing those changes in context of the overall plan, and having just gone through the process of making specific targeted changes of the Crow Canyon specific plan that I thought were going to be really simple, that took over 2 years to actually implement, that since we're trying to get these very surgical block G changes done, to anything that we can get in August to help us see these changes as recommended, and that they are going to be very surgical. But I came away with a new appreciation of how important our specific plans are and the unintended consequences of making a change without really thinking through the implications elsewhere and down the road and state law. I just want to be careful so that when we have our workshop in August, we really know what we're looking at when we make these changes to the North Camino Ramon specific plans. So I guess that's my real specific ask for the next step and when we go forward with looking at the plan. You know.
Oh, no, I didn't. Sabina.
Thank you. So first I want to thank you, Denise, for a great presentation, and Cindy as well. Overall, I really like the plan, the way you've laid out everything, the parks, the paseos and all. I think the question I had and what I'm struggling with is that over this entire year, we've talked about retail, protecting our retail, building retail, having a balance between housing and retail. As a council, as a discussion we had earlier, and for me, giving up that retail to make it purely 100% housing is where I'm struggling with right now. And looks like that's one of the asks as we, change this from the, North Camino Ramon specific plan to just an inclusionary housing plan. So I have no issues with working through what we can do in terms of inclusionary housing, but obviously one of the comments was, we want quality inclusionary housing as well. And one of the advantages of including it in a community like this would be that we would have quality inclusionary housing as well, and we would be able to meet some of those RHNA numbers. But, that's something we can continue to discuss. For me, it's more right now about the retail, and I'm having a very hard time saying, let's just completely give up retail and make it 100% housing. So that's my comment on this.
Let me piggyback on that because I'm a little lost on this. This development is BR6. Is there retail in BR6 that can't be moved to another commercial area if it were in it? I'm seeing one member of the public who just happens to have some familiarity with Bishop Ranch saying no. I mean, are we giving up retail in doing this development plan? Debbie, Lauren, Cindy, be smart, leave your mute on.
No, it's existing office.
There's
no existing retail on this site, but it was designated as a mixed use.
Yeah.
So.
It could.
We got that. I mean, the point that I want to drive home is Sabina's saying she doesn't want to give up retail.
Yeah,
that's the real point here. Okay.
Just to go back, there was no specific requirement for retail to be included in this area. It could have been an office housing mix. And again, it's not that retail couldn't go in, it's just somebody has to propose it. But it's not losing any retail as it exists today.
So maybe I don't have it right, but the way I'm reading is that the North Camino Ramon specific area focused on smart growth principles for a live, work, transit-oriented, pedestrian and bike-friendly neighborhood with a sense of identity. That'll meet and then I think I read somewhere in there that includes retail needs while balancing unmet commercial and retail needs while balancing the quality of life for San Ramon residents. So
that's correct, but there's 300 acres and this particular area was designated as Bishop Ranch mixed use because of the office influence of Bishop Ranch. Okay. And so there was a vision about combining housing and office space. Now, of course, office demand has changed. There's still opportunities for redevelopment elsewhere within the specific plan area that would further those goals, as would housing and connectivity to those adjacent areas from this project.
Okay, so we are talking about moving this away from this project to somewhere else in that specific area.
Not necessarily moving, but the plan can accommodate commercial, retail, office, and other areas as well. There's multiple zones within the North Camino Ramon specific plan that each have a sort of focus to them, whether it's multifamily mixed use, whether it's office mixed use, whether it's Bishop Ranch mixed use. And then there's the Commons area, which was intended to be the core area, which was the primary commercial zone within the area.
Okay. So maybe I'm not understanding this well, as we are being asked to amend that and approve the inclusionary housing. What is the difference between, changing this and amending this? So maybe I need some clarity there.
In terms of the inclusionary changes?
Not the inclusionary changes, like we're saying, we want to amend the North Camino Ramon specific plan here, and instead, go with the inclusionary housing policy, which is more standard. So what is the difference as we do this, as we make this decision?
I think Cindy can address it because there are changes in density as well as levels of affordability. Cindy, you want to?
And then Rick?
Sure. So the current North Camino Ramon land use designation for BR6 is Bishop Ranch mixed use. And as Lauren said, the primary land use pattern for BRMU is commercial, and secondary uses were identified as residential, retail, and other types of mixes of uses to support the primary office uses that are currently in Bishop Ranch.
Okay.
The change that's being proposed is to amend the land use designation from BRMU to what's considered a mixed use residential, which is a mix of densities, or I'm sorry, not mixed use residential, mixed density residential. And mixed density residential would allow for multifamily, single family units with a density range between 14 to 30 units per acre. And so the land use would change it from what's considered a mix of commercial and residential opportunities to a solely residential zoning designation with a change in density. In addition to that amendment of the land use, there's also a separate change proposed for the inclusionary housing ordinance.
Okay. So that was my understanding, that we are going from a mixed use, primarily, focused on office space, to a completely housing use with no mixed use component in it, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, which means we will only have housing, and we will just give up the opportunity to have any coffee shops or, I don't know, co-working spaces or things like that, which I think, as I think about the quality of life of our residents, it's an important aspect of living in communities as we think about the communities of the future. So that is.
Sabina, I think that the real thing that's lost in this is when we did and I'm sorry for cutting you out on you, Rick, but when we did Camino Ramon, we didn't have the 4,500 plan that is changing that Pac Bell buildings, and that, in fact, what were they? Southern Bell or Southern Pacific or AT&T, whoever, they still own that building. So what's happening is the whole area is morphing, and the retail component of it is not only the city center, but it's also moving into 2700. So you'll have people going that way, and who knows, across the street, it may be what Rick's talking about. But if it's something where you want to do each project, that's something that you'll be, deciding on your own. And anyway, do you have more, or I'll move on to Rick?
I don't.
Okay, Rick, go ahead. You're on mute. But it was a great speech.
Thank you. One of my best. I just want to make a comment relative to the 2-acre park. And I'm not talking about the physical design of it. At the first Planning Commission meeting in March, I expressed my concerns about passing the costs of maintenance, repair of any facilities, and replacement of facilities on 404 property owners on I want to reiterate that. I want to say that I can see where changes have been made in the plan. Not all the changes that I would like to see, but I can see that this is a good plan. And I like the housing. I like the housing that's being proposed very well. What I want to say, though, is that passing off the cost of what is essentially a public park that's available to serve our entire population on this number of property owners is not the same as what the city did with the City Walk project. Sunset Development is a very sophisticated, they know how to operate a park, they know what they're getting into type of organization. And for them to assume those costs is a very different thing than right now 404 unsuspecting property owners. And I just don't think you can compare the two. I think it might be helpful as we go through this if the following information could be provided by either the planning staff or the Parks and Community Services staff, and that is, given the park that is laid out right now, what would be the ongoing costs of maintaining that park? What would be the cost on an annual basis of maintenance? What would be the replacement costs of the shade sails? Whatever work might typically happen or need to happen on a pickleball court. It will give people a sense of what are the extraordinary costs that we might be passing on to a group of people. As it stands for me, I recognize that there are times when you have to back off and take the good and not look for the perfect, but passing the costs off to the homeowners association is a showstopper for me.
Mark Armstrong?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Denise, for the presentation. And I appreciate the insights of the planning commissioners, especially tonight during this discussion. You know, previously, especially in the joint meeting we had with the Parks Commission and the City Council, you know, I made some comments about the intentionality and the tie into City Walk and the walking district and things like that. And you've clearly been listening in making these enhancements. I'd still prefer to see a wider green space going down A Street, of course, but I think from the council members' perspective of looking at the big picture, I do think the overall project is certainly in the best interest of the residents and the city. Here we are building out the core area of the city. Talked about smart growth principles and those things. I do like the enhancements. Perhaps I'd like to see more, but I'd like to see what our planning commission and our Parks Commission have in store as the discussions continue down the road. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to add before I'm looking to see if hands and stuff. I don't want to scare you, Mark, but you and I are thinking along the same lines. The HOA, well, I take a different perspective on it. I sat on an HOA that still owned property in there. We had 2 lakes, 2 or 3 pools and a clubhouse, and I'm still trying to figure out how in the heck we put it together. Then on a smaller level, I mean, we all know somebody that lives in Inverness Park, and that park was part of their HOA until they got smart enough to dump it on the city. So the reality is, simply because it works up this way now, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll stay that way. I like the idea in that if this HOA could not keep it up, they've got another burden, and that is that architectural review in Bishop Ranch is Bishop Ranch. And I wouldn't want to let a few weeds start sneaking in there, because unlike some of the things that I look the other way, they don't. But you know, that's up to you guys. When you get to it, you decide. My personal feeling is the development plan's ready. I'd give it a shot and let them know that if it doesn't live up to the standards, that and this is on staff now to show you that, yeah, we can take it if it comes down to that. But if you think the HOA can't keep up that park, you add a bathroom and they'll never keep that up. Sorry, Gene, you and I are going to be on opposite sides on that one, especially as long as we have 2 on the Iron Horse Trail. But that is the thing that's going to be the next coming thing. Where do we get bathrooms to these places that aren't portable? Because every time the door shuts, they email the mayor. So anyway, my personal feeling is I think we've cooked it until August 17th. So I'm sure that everybody will have a wonderful time at that planning commission.
I think Lauren's hand is up, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who? Oh, Lauren. Go ahead, Lauren.
I actually have a question for the city attorney. Do we need to entertain a motion from the planning commission specifically to continue this item to their next regular meeting?
We don't need, this is in essence a referral from the council back down to the commission. So and we could have included the commission in the original vote for the August 17 vote, but it wasn't necessary as the commission doesn't need to refer to itself.
And Lauren, your mayor is so sharp, he knew that.
Excuse me, though, it is a continued public hearing, though.
No.
This is a continued public hearing.
It will be on the 17th. Yes.
It will be a different public hearing.
Okay.
Yes.
So, unless is.
Well, it'll be the second public hearing.
Hearing body. It's a different hearing body, so it can't be a continued public hearing of the same.
Let me ask a question. Is there a downside in the planning commission making a motion to continue the hearing to the 17th at its meeting?
There is no, if we want to do belt and suspenders, there's no issue with having a joint vote of the entire panel that's present tonight.
Yeah. Just before you do anything more, the motion that was voted on, move to close the public hearing and set the next public hearing on this item before the planning commission for August 17th. So Lauren, are you still antsy that we should do this?
If the city attorney's fine with that, that's fine. I just want to make sure we're not creating a technical problem for ourselves with noticing.
I don't believe we are. And I'm happy to go forward with Commissioner Wallace's suggestion of doing a joint vote as well, either way.
Okay, so we have a motion, Wallace. Do we have a second, Alpert?
Second.
Continue the next public hearing, to set the next public hearing on this item before the planning commission for August 17th. You got that, Christina? We had a motion, Wallace, and a second, Alpert. Roll call vote. Oh, Debbie.
Thank you.
Chamberlain has a monkey wrench.
Yeah, so just clarification, we will be doing a notice for the August 17th meeting because it will be the planning commission. So just to kind of close that, but the continuation is good to do. But I just looking towards the commissioners, knowing we're going to the second hearing and the issues or the concerns or comments we'll be focusing on, I just want to kind of, if we can, tie down the park aspect. So in general, is the commission satisfied with the 2-acre park in its location? Because it really does drive the site plan. And so the applicant's going to need to understand if they're looking to make changes down the road, or generally the commission is okay with the park location, its size, and the amenities are going to be worked out, and the maintenance and the ownership will be worked out down the road. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get a general feel from the commission. And I think I have that, but I just want to ask the question directly of the commission.
The development plan that we have has the
respond?
2-acre park. Is that the way I looked at it? Before you vote, are you asking this, Debbie, or do we vote on this with these
I
two?
thought Debbie's asking about the general site plan. Like, are we in agreement that the site plan can move forward, or do we have some major recommendations on the site plan?
That's correct. Thank you, Councilmember Zafar.
So okay, so I'm not clear as to whether you're asking for a non-binding statement of current intention, or
Yes.
you want a binding decision on the location of the park without worrying about bathrooms.
Yeah, non-binding, just understanding that the basically from what I've heard generally from everyone, that the project is headed in the right direction based on the current site plan before you tonight. I understand there may be some tweaks down the road, but just getting that sense that we're working towards this project and moving it forward.
And you're asking for planning commissioners to do a non-binding talk out the
The current
side.
intent, with the emphasis on the non-binding.
A non-binding head nod.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, Eric, are you okay with a 2-acre park?
Okay, that's a misleading question. in the location that it's located in, yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Rick. And you're not on mute.
I realize I'm not on mute. I'm uncomfortable making that kind of a statement prior to us taking an actual vote.
That's okay. That's a
in public
statement.
hearing.
No, that's a statement. Jean?
Well, I've already mentioned that I have some reservations about this. But I
Okay,
seem to
Corey?
be the
I'm generally comfortable with what I'm seeing in the site plan this far.
I think the big thing here is the developer has got to read on how much work they're going to have to do between now and August 17th. And so does staff, because that's usually what happens in all of these things. We go and we go, and until you actually get the, like we're going to do now, Eric, the motion Wallace, second Alpert, where you actually have to say yes or no. So the motion, if that's okay, unless you need further readout, Ms. Chamberlain, you're good. Lauren, okay. So then what, Christina, where'd you go? You're hiding down here in the corner. We have a motion and a second to move the, close the public hearing and set the next public hearing on this item before the Planning Commission for August 17th. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Alpert,
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kuznick,
yes.
and Chair Wallace.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 5-0.
I would just leave you
Sorry, but-
before, go ahead.
Sorry to
Somebody was saying
interrupt, but this was a motion that applies to the entire panel.
yes.
So we need to roll call the council as well.
Again?
Yes.
No, on the same thing.
This, we were doing this as a, I know it's a panel vote. So
Okay. No problem. Motion Hudson, second Perkins?
no. The motion
No,
is
we
already up
continue.
for the entire panel.
Not a new motion, the
It's
old
not a
one.
new motion. We just
Christina,
continue
keep
to
calling
roll
out our
call
names.
the council.
Keep going.
We have a 5-0 from the Planning Commission. I'll do a roll call vote of the City Council. Councilmember Armstrong,
Yes.
Councilmember Veros,
Yes.
Councilmember Zafar,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perkins,
Yes.
and Mayor Hudson.
Yes.
Thank
We
you.
have a
That's it.
5-0 times 2. Okay, I would just say that, you know, this is a very important project. We all know what's at stake. We got to hit the numbers. One of the things that I was really impressed with is you're also thinking outside the box. I'm not so sure, as I told you, Rick, that the commercial is going to come from us, but you darn sure have to be looking. You have to be looking, as Scott and I were talking about, if something, an opportunity comes along, you better grab it. And I think that, you know, there's things we didn't talk about. I don't know where the autonomous vehicle is going to fit in this, these little things scooting down this road because you made it wide enough to carry it. But when you start thinking about the width of the sidewalks, let me remind you, the Iron Horse Trail is 8 feet wide, and that gives you a pretty good indicator of the direction we went tonight. I like the idea that I think we passed on. The development plan is kind of going where it's going, and we'll think about it till August 17th. And if there's no further comments, we are adjourned, and the next regular scheduled council meeting is July 13th, 2021 at 7 o'clock. Thank you for all sticking in there tonight. And I think we got some pretty good comments, and we're moving forward.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.